Over the last 20 or so years, as the starting pitcher has become less and less important in baseball, so we've seen more guys and more innings out of the bullpen. Paul Skenes is a guy who you can look at on your calendar and say, I'm going to watch that guy pitch because I want to see something incredible happen. There's not a lot of appointment viewing when it comes to starting pitchers anymore because, frankly, guys aren't allowed to go complete games. Guys aren't allowed to go past 100 pitches. But this is a guy who won 120 pitches in the College World Series. This is a guy who wants to go deep into the game. This is a guy who throws harder as a starting pitcher than anyone we have ever seen.
That was Jeff Passan on the Pat McAfee Show a couple of weeks ago with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Good to have the boys back together today, and it is a Paul Skenes day here in St. Louis, Alex. The Cardinals get their first experience going up against one of the most universally excitable players that we've seen in Major League Baseball in the last decade or so. Like, guys that come up and have real, tangible buzz around them, especially as starting pitchers. Doesn't happen like this very often. He strikes out Shohei Ohtani the other day against the Dodgers, and then the next at-bat, Shohei Ohtani takes him deep. Like, I'm seeing more video clips of Paul Skenes on my social media over the last month or so, I guess, since he's come up, than any other starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. And that is a big thing for Major League Baseball. They need stars like this to emerge, especially as starters. In a sport where that is dying, Paul Skenes is somebody that can be the answer for it. And Alex, this is the kind of pitcher that Major League Baseball needs. He has gone 6 innings. T-Bone was saying right before we came on, because Pat McAfee's show there, you just heard it from Jeff Passan. He's like, he's going to go deep into games. He actually has gone relatively deep most of his starts. In 3 of his 5, he's gone at least 6 innings. He's gone at least 90 pitches or more in 4 of the 5 starts. So it's not classic old school 120 pitches, but he is getting a little deeper into games than most of the young starters that we see. What's your level of excitement to see him go up against the Cardinals today, Alex?
It's high. I had the conversation with my wife to try and convince her to go to the game tonight because I would have liked to see it. Well, she's got to work, unfortunately. But I had the conversation, which I haven't had a lot of those this season in terms of taking the entire family to Busch Stadium. But, I mean, the hype is real with this kid, and it felt like it started this season when he was in AA or AAA, and then it just, like, followed him. And I don't know the last time Major League Baseball, I should say, just casual fans are following a guy that's in minor leagues all the way up to majors. It feels a lot like what the hype around Steven Strasburg was his first year in Major League Baseball. That's the same type of hype. I think that was 2010, to where it was like, holy bleep, what is this kid going to do? And he backed it up, and Skenes has backed it up for a Pittsburgh Pirates team that I don't think a lot of people had casual interest in coming into the season. So it's absolutely high to see what this kid has to offer. How much Major League Baseball, like what is it that Major League Baseball is talking so much about to actually see it go up against your team? It's real hype right now.
38 strikeouts in 27 innings. That's what he's done so far. Somebody on the text line said, and it's a fair point, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. BK, weren't you the guy that said he wasn't that good after his first start? No, I said that the reaction to his first start was a little overstated, and I still feel that way. 4 innings, 6 hits allowed, walked 2, so he gave up 8 base runners over the course of 4 innings. Yes, he did strike out 7, but his first start was not something that we should have written home about in terms of the excitement level of it. Since then, he's been amazing. 6 innings, no earned runs. 6 innings, 1 earned run. 6 innings, 2 earned runs. 5 innings, 3 earned run, but that was against the LA Dodgers. Gave up the 2 homers, including the one to Shohei Ohtani. Struck out 8, walked just 1. He's been excellent ever since that first start. That first start was weird, but since then he's been great. I will give props where it's deserved, and he deserves them right now. He's been amazing since his first outing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him pitch because I'm a sucker for good pitching. Like, I love looking at the pitching matchups that happen in today's game and go, ooh, wow, this is what the matchup is today. Skenes is going to be something to watch because he's got a pitch we haven't seen, a splinker. I still don't know what it is, but it's like 92 and it's like a splitter and it's awesome. So I am really excited to see Paul Skenes carve up this Cardinals lineup tonight. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to Illinois, got the Circa Sportsbook app, and I'm going to be putting all kinds of bets on the Pittsburgh Pirates and Paul Skenes to be carving up this lineup because, as we know, the Cardinals don't handle the the heat very well, and this guy can bring it.
It's fine. Against the Cubs, 6 innings, no hits, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts. That's the stat line I'm expecting tonight against the Cardinals.
Without the walk.
Just get to the bullpen.
Yeah, minus the walk.
Try to make him throw as many pitches as humanly possible. Get to the bullpen. That's where hopefully you can have some success before they get to the 9th inning, because they've got a really good closer as well. So fingers crossed.
Oh, so right now our sweet spot is the 7th and 8th inning. That's where you can score runs.
Alex, this is one of those guys that strikes fear into you. Like when he's going up against your team, you get a little nervous.
The mustache.
He's amazing. He is really special. There are not a lot of those players right now in the National League Central. And I was thinking about this before the show. Who else fits into that criteria? Who else would you throw into the big board, if you will, of players that when you're going up against them, your team is playing against them, they make you terrified when they either step into the box or when they are on the mound? I think the Cardinals' example of this might surprise some people. I think it's Nolan Gorman, because when he steps into the box, he can do damage at any given time. I don't think it's Mason Wynn. He's a really great player. I love him. He's my favorite player to watch on this team. But I don't think he strikes fear into the opposition the way that a Nolan Gorman does, the way that Kyle Schwarber does when he steps into the box. Who else, Alex, in this division does that for you, where they strike fear into the opposition?
I don't think there is any. I mean, I can hear the argument for Elly De La Cruz, but he has struggled this season, so I can't really say.
He does it for me.
He does it for me. I think he strikes more fear once he's on base than when he's in the batter's
100%.
box. And that's the part that it's like, okay, well, I think I can handle you, but if you get past me, well, then there's problems. Honestly, I don't know if there's another hitter right now that strikes fear on any of these teams, with the exception of, like you said, I do agree, Nolan Gorman's in that category because he might strike out, but boy, he might take you deep, which is the same side of the conversation like a Kyle Schwarber. As a pitcher, I think Ryan Helsley strikes some fear into people for how good he is right now. That's the one. I think that's it.
T-Bone said this earlier, and I think it's a good one. William Contreras, I think, strikes fear into you.
Yeah.
When he walks to the plate, you wonder, like, is he going to do damage against me?
And I guess the Chicago Cubs pitcher that they got from Japan, Imanaga, he's one that should strike fear into people for how he's pitched this season.
He struck so much fear into the Cardinals that they canceled the game.
Yeah.
The sky opened up and they said, no, you shouldn't do this.
I agree with Imanaga belongs in this conversation. De La Cruz belongs in this conversation. For the Brewers, I'd throw Yelich into this because he's back to old Christian Yelich form. He doesn't
scare me.
Who?
Really? Christian Yelich scares me now.
Am I wrong for that? I'm open to the idea that I'm late to the Christian Yelich party, and he's great again, and I should be more scared than I am.
You said...
I'm more afraid of William Contreras when I go up against the Brewers than I am about Christian Yelich.
It's interesting because I think the only reason for that this year is because Yelich had a stint on the IL. Because Yelich has a higher batting average, a higher on base at 394.
Listen, it's a feel thing. I'm not a numbers guy, right?
Slug. Yeah, okay. And he's 53% above league average to add on top of it.
Right.
Like,
it's pretty good.
I think that he's in that conversation for me. The funny thing is like outside of Imanaga, I don't think the Cubs have somebody. Bellinger was probably that guy that last year, but he's not playing well. They don't really have an offense that strikes a ton of fear into you right now. I think the offensive players in the division are De La Cruz is clearly number one for me.
Yep.
I would put probably William Contreras at 2. And then I'd hear an argument for Wilson Contreras when he was healthy. He was going to strike fear into you, but he's not healthy right now. And then I think it's Gorman, probably 3, 4 with Christian Yelich. But pitching-wise, it's Paul Skenes is clearly 1. Jarrett Jones is clearly 2 for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
It's good that Pirates have both of them.
I don't think Helsley strikes fear into a team. I wouldn't put him on my list because he only throws 1 inning.
I would have him on mine as well. I totally agree with you there, Alex. I think that he is a guy that when you play against the Cardinals, you're playing an 8-inning game. Mm-hmm. And I think that, for me, strikes fear into the opposition. Now, I understand. I totally understand the value argument, T-Bone, in terms of like, hey, he's only going out there for an inning. But when the Cardinals would go up against the Brewers in previous seasons, I was terrified of both Devin Williams and of Hader.
Yeah.
If you were playing against the Brewers and those guys were healthy, you were playing a 7-inning game. Because once you got to the 8th, it was over. You were not hitting those two. And so that struck fear into me as an opposition, each of them individually. So I would have Ryan Helsley on this list as well.
I think a bullpen as a group can strike fear into you. I don't know if one reliever can. Because for me, it is 1 inning compared to like a position player like Nolan Gorman, for example, is playing all 9 innings. He's contributing in the field if he's not making an error.
He scares me in the field as a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, that's fair. And he gets 4 to 5 at-bats to strike fear into an opponent. I think Sonny Gray belongs on this list for guys that strike fear in the NL Central, and I know it's weird saying that coming off what's been some weird, like, 4 outings.
I would not put him on that list.
I still think he fits into that category because I know there's been blips on the radar here in the last couple of starts. When Sonny Gray is right, and we saw Sonny Gray right in his first handful of starts, that is maybe one of the most dominant pitchers in the NL Central, probably right there with Jones and with Paul Skenes.
If you're going to have Imanaga on this list, you probably put Sonny Gray on the list as well. And it's why I probably wouldn't have either, if I'm just being totally honest with you. They don't scare me the way that going up against a Paul Skenes does. Like Jared Jones, really good pitcher, really good young pitcher, and is scary. He doesn't impose the same amount of fear for me as Skenes does. Now, he's probably second on that list, but I think the guys that legitimately impose fear on the opposition in the Central are few and far between, man. And it's why when you're going up against one like a Paul Skenes tonight here in St. Louis against the Pittsburgh Pirates, it's a big storyline. So should be a fun one. Cardinals have Miles Michaelis on the mound. Certainly a contrast in styles and in velocity.
He strikes fear
that you'll see tonight.
And the Cardinals fans.
Michaelis versus Skenes. We'll have it covered every possible way over the course of the next 3 hours with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That is where the graveyard chat is off and running already today. In about 15 minutes, we're going to talk to Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider for The Athletic. But next, this might be the thing, a mindset that is holding back some of the Cardinals' young players that they end up missing on. We'll tell you what it is next here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I thought there was a really good piece from Derek Gould that posted yesterday over on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website. He was talking about Alec Burleson and the development that he's seen from Burleson. It also included some development from Nolan Gorman as well, why he's hitting the way that he is. But Burleson gave a great quote in this piece. He was asked about the talent that gets a hitter to the majors and what role the mental approach plays in having success once they get there. And Burleson told Derek Gould, quote, "That's the biggest part. When you ask that question, it kind of reminds me of last year for me personally. That was all a mental battle as far as not playing every day, not knowing when I was going to be in there. That's the bigger battle that you fight. Your talent gets you here, but just maturing mentally and understanding that it is a 162-game season. And if you're not getting your opportunities right now, you're going to have to wait it out or you're going to have to get better, one of those two. Last year, early on, I wasn't the best with handling that. I just wanted to play. I wanted to be an everyday big leaguer, and as the season went on, I understood my role more. I'll work hard when I get my opportunities, and in the offseason, I worked hard to change my role," end quote. So that was Alec Burleson talking with Derek Gould. Alex, for me, my biggest takeaway from this is I think that is where the Cardinals miss on guys. I don't think they miss that often on the talent. I think most people across Major League Baseball now are pretty good talent evaluators. You can see the guys, especially with all of the evaluation tools that we now have with exit velo and spin rates, like all of this stuff. You can measure a lot of this now, and you can see what will or will not translate to the big leagues. It's why certain guys get to AAA. You see the numbers that they're putting up, and the Cardinals will continue to say, that guy's not a big leaguer, because they can see some of the metrics and they can see that's not going to translate to what we are doing at this big league level. There's just too big of a gap between the talent at that level and what you're doing here. Where I think they miss sometimes, and I think it's really hard for teams to hit on this, but some of them are better than others, is the mental aspect. Alec Burleson clearly had the capacity to have success at this level, but it took a minute to translate that. You saw it with Mason Wynn last year. At the end of the season, he really struggled, but he adapted. He got his mental approach to the right place, and this year he's been able to adjust accordingly. I think Nolan Gorman has had to do that, where he adjusts to what pitchers are trying to do to him at the plate. Eventually it clicks for him, and boom, he gets locked in. That's the next step for guys like Jordan Walker and for Dylan Carlson and many of these other young guys that came up to the big league level, have a little bit taste of success, and then struggle. It is the mental adjustments that are hard for a lot of these young players, and I think that is where, at times, the Cardinals are missing.
I find the mental aspect of pro sports, especially with athletes, to be so fascinating, and frankly, I think it's something that we as fans overlook because we just assume everybody's supposed to be able to handle the big spotlights when the brights are the lightest, BK. And if they can't, well, then, okay, well, you're not a good player. And sometimes it takes a couple of years to figure it out. And I think it's awesome that Burleson kind of shed light into this because he's right. Like, when you talk about guys, once you get to this level, it's not so much does your talent play, it's are you going to be able to adjust to the role that you're going to be used as? Because if you become a complementary piece where you've been a star your entire life, which most of these guys, like when you get to pro whatever, you've been a star your entire life. And once you get to the big leagues, there's guys that are bigger stars than you. How do you adjust to that? And it's the conversation T-Bone and I had yesterday because, you know, Mo, when he spoke with the bloggers over the weekend, talked about Mason Wynn being a superstar. And we give credit to the Cardinals in terms of the development of Mason Wynn, but I give credit to Mason Wynn because
Absolutely.
Mason Wynn mentally realized he was a star, and he kept with it no matter the struggles that came at him. Now, he wasn't pushed into a position to where he was a complimentary piece like Alec Burleson was, but Mason Wynn came up last year and struggled, and he was in the minors probably longer than he wanted to be because his ability took him to the next level. But when he had adversity or when he got the opportunity, he continued to believe he was the star. So it's what everybody goes through, and it's such the hard part of saying, like, oh, this guy's going to be a bust because you just don't know until mentally it clicks. It's why a lot of times, BK, you see guys go elsewhere and have success, and you think, oh, well, this team sucks at evaluating that player. Maybe, or maybe the player just was not able to mentally grasp what he needed to at that position, and where there was less pressure. And I'm not saying Alec Burleson went through pressure or Jordan Walker's going through pressure, which they might be, but when you get a chance to go elsewhere, that pressure goes away and you're thinking, all right, now I can strike. And that seems to be the juggle right now in terms of developing these players.
Yeah, it is. And I also think, like, when we talk about the mental side of things, it's not necessarily like aptitude, right? It's not about, hey, this guy's smart, this guy's dumb. It's not what we're saying. Because I think sometimes it can be construed as such, and it's not that. Alec Burleson last year, I think he's admitted as much, was a little headstrong in his approach. He believed, hey, I have great bat-to-ball skills, which makes sense. He does. I can hit anything that is thrown my way, and I'm going to put it in play. And the Cardinals basically told him, and both sides have talked about this since, hey, that's great that you can put everything in play, but we want you to do damage. We want you to swing at the pitches that you can go up there and hit for doubles and hit for homers. And last year, he wasn't doing that enough. He was just swinging at everything, putting stuff in play, but it's weak groundouts to second base. That doesn't do much for you or for the team. And so he adjusted. He decided, okay, I need to do something different to have success at this level. Mason Wynn. In the minor leagues, he had more power than what I think a lot of people give him credit for. He was hitting home runs in the minor league level. He has said as much this season, I had to change my plan. Getting up here to the big league level, I'm not going to hit a bunch of home runs right now. Maybe eventually that'll be a part of Mason Wynn's game at a higher level. I can hit line drives, though. I can have gap-to-gap power, hit a bunch of doubles, and use my speed once I get on the bases. And that has been his big adjustment this year compared to what he was at the end of last year. This is where I will go to Jordan Walker. I think eventually he's going to have to make an adjustment. And I know people get frustrated with the launch angle thing, and that's fine. I understand it. But he needs to change, A, his approach at the plate, and B, his swing path. Because the best version of Jordan Walker is going to hit for power. He needs to. He has to be off of the ground. The reason why we like ground ball pitchers, why they have so much success, is that ground balls are a lower percentage play. They are going to have power. They are going to hurt the opposition at a lower rate than if you get the ball in the air and hit those line drives or hit those fly balls that are pulled. That is where Jordan Walker is going to have some success. So I think a lot of this comes down to, are you willing to make the adjustments to not just quote unquote save your career, to allow your career to thrive at this level? Alec Burleson did that. Mason Wynn has done that. And now we get to see, I think Nolan Gorman has done that. Now we'll see, can Jordan Walker be the next guy that is able to do that? He needs to do it at the AAA level now, and then we'll eventually see if he can thrive at the big league level again.
Yeah, and that's why I just felt like for the longest time for Jordan Walker, and now it's to the point where I would say you keep him in the minors, you let him play the rest of the season out unless you absolutely need him, because right now it's just sticking with consistency. But by next year, or when he comes back up this year, if he comes back up this year, don't send him down again, because sending it back up and down, that's part of the mental game that you're trying to figure out. And at some point, you just need to tell him you're a big leaguer, but you got to figure it out at the big leagues. And if it doesn't work, then you're going to have to go elsewhere.
As we're talking about the Cardinals minor league development, most of this has been focused on the hitting side of things. On the pitching side of things, there was a positive earlier today. Cooper Jerpy, former first-round pick by the Cardinals, was promoted. He's going to be heading to Springfield. He's had a ton of success this year at Peoria. The strikeout numbers are insane. Now, I would like to see them allow Cooper Jerpy to go deeper into games. They're kind of handling him similar to the way that they did with Tink Hintz last year, where it's 65 pitches or fewer in any individual start. I'd like to see that go up a bit, but at least he's having success. That's the most important thing. He's going up to Double-A. We'll see what that means, but it's a good sign for him that he's having success and getting promoted. They also have Quinn Matthews right now down in Palm Beach. He's been amazing for them, and he's having a ton of success, so that is a positive development as well. They have a couple of guys that you're starting to see between those two and with Tink Hintz at Double-A. Those are the names now to keep an eye on. It seems like everything at AAA has pretty much stalled out. You're hoping that eventually Gordon Graceffo maybe can be a bullpen arm. The guys that can potentially help the Cardinals' rotation long-term are at Double-A or below, for better or worse. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. But coming up next, Jeremy Rutherford. I want to ask him what he has learned from the Panthers' success thus far in the Stanley Cup Final. JR next here on 101 ESPN.
Terry Henderson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals back in action tonight as they start a 3-game set with the Pittsburgh Pirates. 6:45 will be first pitch. Paul Skenes is on the mound for Pittsburgh. Miles Michaelis will get the start for St. Louis. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to hear from Jeremy Rutherford. He's the Blues insider for The Athletic. He joins us each and every Tuesday here on the show. JR, what's going on, man?
Not too much. Just here to report I'm unlocked and back on Twitter. And when I tell you how excited I am to be back on Twitter, I know I'm not on the YouTube camera, but my eyes are rolling right now.
I didn't see any tweets from you with a money sign in your tweet, JR, so you kind of failed on getting hacked.
Yeah, no, believe me, when they said you're unhacked and you're good again, we've recognized your account, I was bummed out for a little while.
Yeah, I can totally understand that, JR. All right, let's get into the hockey from last night. The Florida Panthers up 2-0 now in the Stanley Cup final. They win 4-1 against the Oilers. JR, what are you seeing in this series? How are the Florida Panthers having so much success shutting down what is one of the most potent offenses in all of hockey?
It truly is remarkable to watch. And this time of year, watching a team that could go on and win the Stanley Cup, whether it's the second round, third round, or now you're in the Cup final, is always a pleasure to watch because you just see a team that has everything and it's coming together for them. But to watch that game last night and watch the Florida Panthers play defense on the Edmonton Oilers, who have just the most explosive offense, power play, 5-on-5, and shut down these two guys, McDavid and Draisaitl, just one assist, or there's one goal through 2 games, is really fun to watch. So I heard you ask the question, like, what do you learn from this Panthers team, and apply it to the Blues? Obviously, roster is completely different. The organizations are at a different stage. But in terms of what the Blues can learn from it, I don't think there's much that's surprising, BK. I think it's a combination of amazing goaltending. You got that in Game 1 from Bobrovsky. Defensive play. Everybody always says defense wins championships. That's what you're getting here. And I mentioned it to you guys last week, a team that's been hardened. You had the Florida Panthers go win the President's Trophy a few years ago. Then last year they go to the Cup final. They know what it takes. I thought Paul Maurice, the coach, had a great comment. It's in Pierre LeBrun's story today. He said he told his coaching staff, be careful what we tell these guys because they are listening and doing everything we say right now because of the buy-in being so high. So please be careful.
That was the quote that stuck out to me, JR, when I read that piece earlier today because, we talk so much about buy-in. I felt like it was the narrative of this Blues team for the past 2 years of them not buying into Craig Berube and then they buy into Drew Bannister. I also wonder how much that plays into a team that knows they have a Stanley Cup potential, whereas a Blues team, it feels like, at least watching them play last season, they realized where they were in this kind of retool, and it's hard to buy in when you know you don't have that Stanley Cup level.
Yeah, different levels, and I know people get tired of that cliche buy-in, but since we're talking about it, there's different levels of it. You got a situation in 2019 where I witnessed the same thing firsthand. Blues fans did too, watching that roster buy into everything Craig Berube and the rest of the staff was saying because it was working and they were on the verge of winning a cup. So you want to be the player who does everything he can, sacrifices to be that guy, and that's what you're seeing right now with the Florida Panthers, just a couple wins away. It's completely different when you're talking about a team that's in a retool and you're trying to, are they buying into Craig Berube still? Are they not? Okay, now Drew Bannister's the coach. How do we get them to buy into Drew Bannister? You're not talking about guys who are coming to the rink knowing that they could win a cup in a couple weeks. So it just has to start from scratch. You got to get guys believing in each other. But the success has to come. You guys always talk about it. Like, winning cures everything. And you start winning, and that's what's going to fix some of the issues, and whether it be personalities or things coming together in the locker room. So I think once Drew Bannister and his staff can start to lay that foundation next year, and they can start to build towards that, then you start getting the roster and bringing in the parts, and probably a couple years away from being anywhere close to what the Florida Panthers are bringing every night.
Jeremy Rutherford is our guest here on 101 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter. He now has it at JP Rutherford. JR, I'm watching this series, and I'm seeing this big left-handed defenseman. He's 6'4", he's 210 pounds, he's 28 years old. He's on the ice at the end of games trying to kill all the plays for the Edmonton Oilers. He's playing 20 minutes a night for them. Looks like a legit top four defenseman, and I'm just wondering, like, how can the Blues find a player like that? His name's Nico Mikkola. He was here, and now he's with the Florida Panthers in the Cup. What is the lesson here, JR, if anything, about how to handle young defensemen and how long it takes them to become the players that they're ultimately going to be?
Yeah, I think a lot of cases are going to be different. Now, you can look at this case and say he's definitely a guy that the Blues should have hung on to, and I agree with you. Believe me, I've received I can't count the text messages from people about Nico Mikkola in this playoff. Keep in mind this before we get into Mikkola and how you look at defensemen. The Blues wanted to get a first-round pick for Vladimir Tarasenko. I think that they felt they could get one. The Rangers needed a big defenseman, so they included Mikkola in that trade. His contract was coming up, and who knows how much he was going to cost. And the Blues had some guys in their system who they really liked and wanted to give a chance to, one of them being Scott Prnovich whenever he got healthy. Now you look at the situation. How did this guy get away? He's exactly what the Blues could use right now. If they had it to do all over again, perhaps they make a different decision, but they can't. You move forward. Now you got some holes on your defense you're trying to fill. What's the lesson here to me? I look at Nico Mikkola and look at that size, and you can never replace that, especially when you look at this Blues defense, and they've got a couple guys on the smaller side, and you think back to their Stanley Cup team, and that's what really pushed them over the edge was that lankiness on their defense. So it would be really nice to have Mikkola right now. Yeah, I think if there is one, it's to find some of those guys that can play in all those situations. And size never hurts.
JR, can I be honest with you right now? Like, this is a safe space, right? We can talk?
Totally, not on the air or nothing here.
What I don't want to happen is the Blues defense to turn into a Cardinals outfield conversation where it's, you can't give up on a Scott Perunovich or you can't give up on a Nick Leddy or any of these guys that you got because look at the guys going on to have success elsewhere. I say that
it is becoming.
I say that tongue in cheek, but here's why I'm starting to get nervous. The Blues have a new head coach, and defensively, sure, you improved slightly last year, but you still were bad in certain areas. I don't want this narrative in the offseason to be, we don't want to make rash changes when we have a new coach stepping in who might get the best out of these guys.
Jake Wallman, man.
No,
shut up, BK.
Yeah, it's a great point. And hey, just because he said Jake Wallman, I'll say this and. BK, this isn't directed at you. It's just that's been a conversation for the past couple of years. I feel like Jake Wallman and Vince Dunn, even him, were given plenty of opportunity here. I really do. I don't think it was a situation where the Blues didn't, give them a bigger role and they failed. Like
carrying the water for the organization, JR.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
It ain't Blue season yet, all right? It's still Cardinals season.
I'm kidding, JR. I'm with you.
I watched Jake Wallman, get some top-line minutes and make some mistakes. And sure, maybe you go with him for another couple of years and he continues to make those mistakes. I just firmly believe that when players go to different organizations like Detroit, where Wallman went, and the expectations aren't as high as they were here in St. Louis when he left, and Detroit just pencils him into the top pair, plays him 25 minutes. The Blues weren't in a position where they could have allowed that. So then he develops, and we're not watching every night. We're not seeing the mistakes. And then all of a sudden we see a guy who's performing in the top pair. Sure, it could have happened, but, similar situation with Vince Dunn. So I agree with you, Alex. I think it's a situation where you can't overreact, but when you do see a couple defensemen move on and have a lot of success, it probably does make you a little gun-shy when you're making these moves. But I agree with you that Doug Armstrong can't be worried about that. Like, he needs to. He has to make changes with this defense. I don't know how you come back with the same 6 or 7, even though that the unit was better overall last year. I think in order to take that next step, this defense is going to have to it's going to have to look a little different.
And it is worth noting, this was a much worse year in terms of the analytical numbers. I know nobody wants to hear it. A nerdy BK over here. The nerdy numbers were not kind to Jake Wallman this year in his time with Detroit. So he had a really good season 2 years ago, I guess it was. This past season, not so much. JR, final question that I've got for you. It was announced since our last conversation that the cap is going to go up to $88 million for the upcoming year, and the expectation is it'll go up, I believe it's 5% each year after that. How much, if at all, do you think that plays into what the Blues offseason plan is going to be this year?
Yeah, I don't think it impacts it much. We'll pay attention to that. We anticipated a jump like we saw, 88. I think the Blues are going to be able to use that to their advantage in the future. Again, I go back to my conversation with Tom Stillman, not just a month or so ago, but a couple of years ago. He said, we're going to get to a point somewhere along the line where it's not going to make sense to spend to the cap just because of the situation we're in. And then when I talked to him just a month ago, he said, I don't expect a splashy free agent, but Doug, he can pull a rabbit out. And I don't know that means in regard to free agency, but it could be in relation to anything. But here's the thing. If you can go out and find those players that fit in their age bracket, who maybe you're going to have to pay eventually, the Blues, Tom Stillman, he said, we're willing to do that, but you just can't predict when those situations are going to present themselves. But, to me, the cap going up this year, I don't look at the Blues situation any differently and say, oh, okay, well, now they're going to go out and do X, Y, Z and, could contend for the top 3 in the division next year. I think this is money that we expected would be available to all teams, and that the Blues would probably take advantage of it moving forward, not this year, but in the future.
Hey, JR, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the rest of this Cup. Hopefully it is not a sweep in one way, but hopefully we get a good rest of the series. I think Edmonton's going to get Game 3. Do you have a prediction for that one?
Yeah, I think that home crowd is just going to be bonkers. And McDavid, these guys are going to figure out a way. I just think that Florida's suffocated them. And I think we see what we saw last night with Draisaitl, gets frustrated, takes the emotion out, big hit. They just can't have things like that. These guys need to be on the scoreboard, not in the penalty box. But Florida's played really well, like I said. So it looks like they're inching closer to that Stanley Cup, which would be good for this Tkachuk family here in St. Louis, who's been waiting a long time for it.
JR, appreciate you, man. Be well.
Yep, see you guys.
You got it. That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each and every Tuesday here on BK and Ferrario. Dude, that hit by Draisaitl last night was dirty.
Yeah, to me, that's the sign of a broken team. That's a team that has no answers.
If it wasn't Leon Draisaitl, that would have been a massive penalty, and people would have been there would have been a lot more conversations about it if it was a player with a different kind of reputation.
I think that was a bad move by Edmonton, because I think that just lit even more of a fire under the Florida Panthers. Because not only did you didn't do it against third or fourth line guy, you did it against their best player.
It was a classic thing, though, that you guys talk about, where you get into the late game and you're like, we're going to send a message. Yep. No, you sent no message. You sent the message to the Panthers of, we have taken ourselves out of this series. We are no longer playing for this game. We are trying to get physical. That's not the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, the Oilers basically said, we can't beat you when you're healthy, so we're going to have to take out one of your players. And terrible. I think that is a bad tone to send when you are down by 2 games in a series.
Yeah, the other team that's in this series is more than happy to play that style, if that's what you want to play, Edmonton. And they're a lot better at it.
Did you see Ekblad put Evan Bouchard in a chokehold? That was great.
That was amazing.
Bouchard was tapping. Like, hey man, stop.
Hey, listen, we get it. We're both away from the scrum. Like, can you let go?
You're tough, I'm tough. Leave me alone.
All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, which team is most likely to be this year's version of Arizona? And what we're referencing there is in the National League wildcard race, somebody's going to emerge, you would have to imagine. Who is that team? We'll talk about that at the top of the hour. Questions and Answers is next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Classic Air Care, working with our HVAC system. I love working with them, and I have been doing so since 2016. Had our first home with a unit that I believe was 28 years old when we bought it, and we made it through the entirety of using that home. And then once we moved into our new one, once again, old unit, but because I'm on the maintenance program, which they come out twice a year in the summertime and the fall, right before I flip on the heat, the AC, to check it, to fine-tune it, make sure it's good to go for the season. And let me tell you, I've had so much success with Classic Air Care. And if you don't believe me, check out the tons of reviews that are up on Google Review. They've got a 4.8 rating. This one from Gail. We've been with Classic Air Care for a few years now. Service is outstanding. Today, Anthony performed our annual furnace check and extremely thorough. He even fixed our humidifier for us. I highly recommend Classic Air Care. You need to get with the right company that takes care of you, that's honest with you, and is always there to help you, and that's Classic Air Care. They've been doing so since 1926. Give them a call today. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you, or you can check them out online at classicaircare.com.
Three one four 9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now. By the way, Jeremy Rutherford's got a piece coming up here shortly that will be posting on The Athletic. Wanted to make sure that we mentioned this. Blues Stanley Cup trivia for fans. It's going to be posting over at The Athletic.
I would crush that.
So be sure to check that out whenever it does. I think that's going to be a lot of fun for fans, especially as we went Blues Day, Alex. It's just one day away. Tomorrow morning, Braden Shin is going to join the opening drive. We will be joined tomorrow right around this time, actually, with Jordan Bennington, the Blues Stanley Cup winning goaltender. And the afternoon show, I do believe, is going to have Colton Parayko and Alex Petrangelo. We went Blues Day tomorrow right here on 101.
Should
ESPN.
I reach out and see if Greg Wyshynski wants to hop on at the same time?
With Benner?
Yeah, is Benner?
12 o'clock hour?
He gave Benner his credit.
Yeah.
Remember, he said top 3 should have been in the Vezina Trophy conversation.
Yeah, well, we'll let him get on the line with Benner and go back and forth. I think it'd be great.
I don't think Benner would say anything. I think Benner is in a good place in his life right now that he wouldn't. Well,
the good news is he's joining the show where you haven't tried to trade him. None of us have tried to trade him.
I specifically haven't.
Yeah.
I want to make this very clear. Alex sometimes says this stuff, and it makes it seem like I actually said the opposite. I did not.
I'd get rid of him.
I have said all along.
That's what I mean.
would not trade Jordan Pennington.
I'm very honest. Look, you'd called for Ivan Barbashev's head for that entire season.
Oh, okay.
But for Benner, you've stuck with it, and I'll give you credit.
All right, from the 314. Guys, neither of these things are going to happen, but if the Cardinals could trade for either Luis Robert or Jesus Luzardo, which would you choose? I would go Luzardo in a nanosecond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same.
Luis Robert can't stay healthy, man. It's the Tyler O'Neill experience. But I don't want to sign up for that again.
Boy, I'd be very worried, though, when he goes somewhere where he gets traded and he does stay healthy, like he's like consistent. But I'm with you. I'm not going to take a chance on a dude who's been healthy for one season. I'll get the starting pitcher.
I would love to have Luis Robert. I would not love to give up the package that I'm going to have to in order to obtain Luis Robert. It's going to be massive. There was a report from Bob Nightingale that they're expecting as much or more than what the Nationals got in return for Juan Soto when he was traded to the Padres. They're not going to get that. They shouldn't get that because he's not the player that Juan Soto was. He's got more control, but he's not the same player. So, no, I'm out.
Yeah, I would much rather have Luzardo because Robert can't stay healthy. And it's bad with his health when I see a segment on MLB Network discussing if he can be a superstar because of the lack of games that he has played. Mm-hmm. So it's Luzardo every day of the week for me.
All right, this one comes from the 314. Alex BK for questions and answers. What do you think of trading for Anton Lundell instead of Sam Bennett? He's an RFA, may not be able to keep him long term if they decide to keep their other guys instead. They call him Baby Barkov.
Yeah.
Oh, Baby Barkov?
That should tell you exactly why you're not acquiring Anton. You think they're going to trade a 22-year-old who's been deemed Baby Barkov? No. They'll trade Sam Reinhart in a second before they'd move that guy. That's their second. That's Sam Bennett for them next year. He's on the third line for him right now. It's the same thing that the Blues did with Ivan Barbashev. They moved Ivan Barbashev up into a top 6 role when they felt like he was ready to do it, and he had success. Florida's going to do that next year, which is why I brought up Sam Reinhart.
From the 217, guys, why don't you do a segment like The Fight or a trivia segment like the other two shows? Are you scared of losing to the listeners?
BK hates fun.
Yeah. And BK scared to lose the listeners.
None of those two things are true. I'm not a big radio trivia guy. It's not something that appeals to me. And
well, maybe you should ask the rest of the group first.
I support his decision there. I had to do gauntlet questions, the fight questions. It sucks coming up.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody does their show a little differently. Randy is... The thing that makes Randy special doing this is his ability to remember key events or key numbers, whatever. And so his thing is doing trivia. So I get why Randy Carricker would do trivia. It was the smartest thing they could have done when he got into this job doing the fast lane back in the day because it puts his skills on display. That is not a skill that I have. So doing that for us doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that is the honest to God answer as to why. It's just not something.
It's a skill I have.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
not something that does anything for me. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. From the 314, guys, have you seen the prices on tickets tonight to see Paul Skenes play against the Cardinals? I'm shocked. I could get in the game for like $10.
Oh, less than that. You should go flip your sofa over at your house, and you might be able to go to a Cardinals game.
Sweet.
Are you guys surprised by this?
No.
No.
Am I wrong for being surprised?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure.
You're 500 team. I don't think anybody wants to pay 500 or a lot of money to go see an average team play another average team.
Yeah, I think though there is hype around Paul Skenes, it's still two really just blah baseball teams, and I think this is more of a signal about how people feel about the Cardinals than it is about the hype around the Pirates.
I agree.
And I think that's why you're seeing tickets so low and why people don't really want to go.
I could sit in the first row of the right field terrace tonight for $7, including fees. The tickets are actually $1. It's $6 in fees.
Dang. All right.
They're essentially saying, would you like to go to the Cardinals game? We will pay for you to go.
Oh, well, I want to go to the Cardinal game.
$5 Busch Lights pregame. Go sit in the right field terrace.
I'm in.
It's a good gig, man.
I tried to convince my wife. I'll go if you want. You cool with me bringing 2 little kids?
You can sit down the
3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Right field line, dugout box, row C. So third row.
I'll tell you
$25, including $12 in fees.
Games at what, 7:15?
6:45.
They
right?
typically lose their ish about 6 o'clock, T-Bone, if that makes you any more confident about going with us.
No, I'm out. You know what? I'll text my older roommates.
You can have my 3-year-old will sit with me, and you can have the 1-year-old.
No,
She's easier.
No, thanks. I'm out. Look, man, the single life means I don't have to deal with that.
Row 2 of the bleacher seats, right down the right field line, right by the foul pole. $22.
Gonna get a nice sunburn if you sit
including
there.
$10 in fees.
Gonna catch
So
a Brian
$12
Reynolds
tickets.
home run.
It's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. And it's a Bud Bash game, right? Tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
East Ringhausen?
The Izzy bobblehead.
Izzy
Yeah.
bobblehead? Man, that's shocking. Didn't see that one coming. That was not on my bingo card. For tonight, Paul Skenes is a different animal. I would have thought that there would have been more demand for these, but clearly I was wrong. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, better to forget it. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys have a scenario, we will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. But next, which team currently stuck in this middle of the National League in the wild card standings is most likely to be the 2024 version of last year's Arizona Diamondbacks? We'll tell you our thoughts on that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK. So you look at this race in the National League right now, and it ain't much of a race. It's like me on my half marathon that I'm running on Saturday, Alex. I know I'm not in the same shape that I was 3 years ago. I got a baby boy running around now. My runs have been cut short a couple of times during my training. It ain't going to be the same pace that I once had. And that's what the National League looks like right now. There's a lot of teams that are pacing for like 82 wins when all is said and done. And this is what was always the logical endpoint for Major League Baseball when they decided to make the change and go with the 3 wild cards. Last year, you had Arizona that made the postseason with 84 wins. They were not a great regular season team. They had a negative run differential for the regular season. They were outscored by their opponents by 15 runs during the regular season. They get into the playoffs and they go on a run because they had the 3-headed monster at the front end of their rotation and a bunch of young bats that hit immediately upon hitting the month of October. Alex, when you look at the National League wildcard standings right now, and there's a lot of teams that I'm about to read off to you because all of them are within 2 games of one another. The Padres, the Giants, the Reds, the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Pirates, and once again, the Diamondbacks. Which one of them do you think has the best chance to be this year's version of last year's D-backs?
I have 2 teams, if that's okay. It's the Diamondbacks again, but it's the Cubs for me. And I think the Cubs are the one that, I think it's the Cubs that would be higher on this list, in my opinion. I think they have the offense. I know it hasn't been hitting, but I just think they're in a slump. And I think when they come out of it, you have a lot of impact bats in that lineup. And I know we're playing the what-if game, but more so than anything, their rotation. Their rotation is the part that I look at and I say, like, man, they're strong. And I know how the Chicago Cubs operate, and if they feel like they're able to compete, they're going to spend assets to go out there and make an upgrade, a significant upgrade. It wouldn't surprise me if they went and got a Pete Alonso or a Jesus Luzardo by the end of the trade deadline.
There was a rumor yesterday, I think it was, that they have already contacted the Blue Jays about, hey, if Vlad Guerrero becomes available, please keep us apprised.
So when you're talking about Bellinger, about Happ, about Christian Morel, and I know Dansby Swanson isn't an impact bat, but he's a good complementary piece. When those guys start hitting, and you've got Imanaga, Assad, Steele, and they go out and make a big move, they would be the team that I'd say a lot of what ifs because it has to get fixed. But they would be the team I would look at and say in the second half, watch out for them.
Yeah, the one or the 2 for me would be Arizona because I think their biggest problem is, one, they've got to figure out what's wrong with Corbin Carroll. His numbers are still abysmal so far this season. And the big thing for them, and I think it's the biggest reason why they're struggling, 3 of their 4 starters are hurt right now. They had a big 4 for them coming into the season with Zach Gallen, IL, Merrill Kelly, IL, Eduardo Rodriguez, IL, Jordan Montgomery, not effective so far this year. And I think of those 4 guys, I think once you get back and get healthy and Montgomery starts to get kind of his legs back under him from having a weird offseason, I think they can be what they were last year. And then the other one for me is the Padres. The Padres feel like this team to where you look at that lineup, it's not extremely deep, but I didn't feel like the Diamondbacks lineup was extremely deep last year. But they've got some star power in Tatis Machado. They've got a good on-base guy in Arise. If Bogaerts comes back and can find his sea legs, then they're going to be just fine offensively. And it goes back to their pitching as well. If they can get their pitching healthy with Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove on the IL, they've got Dylan Cease who's pitching like a NL Cy Young candidate. Boom, all of a sudden you've got a 3-headed monster in your rotation, just like Arizona can have, and you've got a solid enough offense that can get you through the postseason. So those are the 2 teams for me.
So I think it's going to come down to the following, and I'll give you my answer after I read these. The following players all currently have an OPS of 750 or below. So basically, they're all league average or worse. And listen to the names that I'm about to mention here. Elliot De La Cruz, Jonathan India, Dansby Swanson, Cody Bellinger, O'Neill Cruz, Brian Reynolds, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Corbin Carroll, Lourdes Gurriel, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. That was 12 names, arguably the 12 best hitters on those teams, or at least 12 of the best hitters on those teams coming into the year. That was our expectations. All of them currently have an OPS of 750 or below. The vast majority of them 700 or below. I think it's going to come down to, and T-Bone, I think you said this the other day. I think it's a really good point. Which of those stars ends up hitting? Who's the guy that catches fire for a 2-month stretch and carries his team into the postseason? That's the team that's going to go on this run. Corbin Carroll was the guy that made that thing go in October last year for the Arizona Diamondbacks. We can talk as much as we want to about their starting pitching. It was a huge importance. Their bullpen was dynamite at the back end. They had 3 really young guys that had stepped up in a big way with Gurriel, with Corbin Carroll, and the other one was Gabby Moreno, who was amazing in the playoffs last year. Those 3 guys carried the offense. I think you're going to see something similar this year with one of these teams having maybe 2 key bats that go on a big-time run. And if I'm looking at these names, who is most likely to do that? I think it's probably the Diamondbacks again, if I'm being totally honest. I don't believe Corbin Carroll's just a bad hitter now. I think Manny Machado will get back. I think he's been hurt. I don't think he's right now offensively. I don't think that the guys on the Pirates or the Cubs have the ability to do this. I think Ellie De La Cruz could, but he just strikes out so much. I'm not sure he's ready to be that guy just yet. I think the Diamondbacks are the team that I trust the most in this regard. The other team that could do it, Alex, and I could just flip the names, it could be the Cardinals. I know people are going to yell at me for saying this, but Wilson Contreras could be one of those hitters, and one of Nolan Gorman or Mason Wynn or Alec Burleson or Jordan Walker could be that guy for you. And so I think those are, to me, the 2 teams that are most likely to go on this run, but the reason why it's probably more likely that the Diamondbacks would do it is because of their pitching. It's hurt right now, but if they get it right and they get it healthy and you get to the trade deadline, they could, in August into September, be the same team that they were last year with pitching that carries them and key young position players that are able to generate the offense that they promise.
I agree with you on the offense. On the pitching side, I think you're going to have to go get one more big-time starter to be in that conversation if you're the Cardinals.
I agree.
I think you got to get somebody with Sonny Gray because I don't see it as Miles Mikolas. I think Miles Mikolas or Kyle Gibson can be your Brandon Pfaadt like the Arizona Diamondbacks had, but I don't believe you have your other big weapon to use in the postseason.
Yeah, I think when you look at these teams, and the separating point for me is the starting pitching, because all these lineups are kind of the same. They are the Spider-Man meme, and I do believe, and I agree with it, is whichever superstars start to hit are going to be the team that can really get going finally. But I also think it comes down to your pitching, because all these teams that we're talking about, outside the Cincinnati Reds, I think you have the second worst rotation out of all these teams. I don't think the Cardinals' rotation is better than the Cubs. I think it's close. I don't think it's better, though. I don't think you're better than the Pirates now that they've got all these kids that are up here pitching. You're not better than the Padres when they are healthy, and you're not better than the Diamondbacks when they are healthy. So you're like second to last of all these teams that we're talking about when it comes down to your pitching on paper. And I understand that the Cardinals are healthy at this point, but even when you look at their statistics, they're not all that great when you look at what the Cardinals have done from a rotation standpoint.
Sure. I think Sonny Gray helps you in this regard. I think Kyle Gibson helps you in this regard. And I think Alex said it correctly. If you are still in this race, in it meaning kind of where you are right now or better, within a couple of games of the last wild card spot, you're still in contention once you get to the deadline. This is a team, I think you guys had this conversation yesterday, that is worth investing in. And the reason why, in my opinion, is because you don't have an easy way to just like flip the switch right now in terms of like going to the other direction. You're too good for that. And I know people don't want to hear it because it's not fun to watch on a night in, night out basis, but you got to get real bad real quick to be able to be where the Mets, the Rockies, and the Marlins are. You got to be really bad. And I don't think this team is capable of getting there. We'll see. Knock on wood. Hopefully I end up being right on that. But I don't think they're at risk, or even in a best case scenario for some people that want them to go there, I don't think they're capable of that. So I think it is more likely and better for the team now and long term to continue investing. I'm not saying go out there and get like the number one starter that is available on the market, but can you, if Luis Severino continues pitching like this, can you get him? I think he upgrades what your ceiling is in your rotation. Is he a traditional number 2 starter? No, but he's got swing and miss stuff, can give you 5 solid innings, and could probably start a game 2, give you a fine start, 5 innings, 2 earned runs against something like that, strikes out 6, and you go to your bullpen and you're feeling pretty good about it with Steven Matz and then Matthew Liberatore and then the back end guys that you go to there. I think that could be quote unquote enough if your offense is hitting by then to be this year's version of the Diamondbacks. And that is your Brandon Pfaadt. Whoever you bring in, that becomes your Brandon Pfaadt in that scenario.
I think the problem for the Cardinals is they are so stuck in the middle of the National League that though, yes, they are worth investing in, they're not worth investing a lot in.
I agree with that.
And that's the problem. And when I say that,
I don't think any of these teams are worth investing a lot in.
When I say that, I think they should trade Ryan Helsley still at the trade deadline.
I agree.
Like for what you're talking about, yeah. They're not a playoff contender right now.
Anywhere.
If you're going to get Severino, you're still not good enough.
I just totally disagree with that.
You're not going anywhere.
I think getting Severino gives you a chance in a wild card, you're not going anywhere after that.
Yeah. You're going to match.
If that's the case, I still want to capitalize while Helsley's still got maybe the best value on the market from the top reliever potentially available here at the trade deadline.
I would bring in the most I could, and he is, because I don't know if Mason Miller, I think his name is, from the Athletics, I don't know if he's going to get traded.
I don't think he will.
He's going to be the best player available on the market as a closer, and if you're telling me that the Dodgers, that the Phillies, that the Yankees are all going to be fighting for that pitcher, I don't care if I'm the number 2 team in the wild card, I'm making the trade.
I mean, to your guys' point, like, you look at what the Royals are doing this year. How did they become this team? Because they traded their closer last year. They traded Aroldis Chapman, got Cole Reagans. Cole Reagans has now made 14 starts, 79 innings for them, and has a 3.1 ERA. He's probably top 10 in the Cy Young conversation in the American League this year. Like that, it totally changed their outlook for the 2024 season by trading a closer that wasn't going to be around long term for them. Now, he was a guy that ended up, I think he was a free agent after last season, so it was like 2 months of control, whereas Helsley is the rest of this year and all of next. I just think it is, if you are still in contention, I would continue to build. I would continue to throw assets at this team, not trade assets away from the team. I would look at that as an offseason move. If you're going to go that route with Ryan Helsley, I would probably do that in the offseason, unless you're out of it. If you're like 4 games back and they're playing bad baseball, they don't look like a real contender at that point in time, then I'm willing to have the conversation. But as of today, I think this is a team that should and will add to the team, not subtract from it.
I think if you're not adding it to, Helsley's on the market.
Yeah.
If you're gonna buy, then you need to buy a 2. If you don't want to sell off pieces, and when I say pieces, I mainly just mean the bullpen. The bullpen's where you've got the most value on this team. If you are going to invest in this team, actually invest in the team. Make them a contender.
Unless you're planning on making Helsley a starting pitcher next year.
No. I say no quickly because if you're not going to go all the way in on investing and you're just going to go out there and get a Severino, who I think is like the 3. I think Severino's like the perfect 3 for a team.
I think that's fair.
Said that in the offseason, by the way. Not a big deal.
He is the kind of guy, though, that I like to invest in at the deadline, not in the offseason.
You wanted to see it.
Especially for this
100%
team that could not afford to lose a starting pitcher. Yeah. You could not invest in a guy that never stays healthy.
I like to put faith in individuals, and I have faith that Severino is going to figure it out.
We did get this texted, and it's probably similar to what Alex and T-Bone are feeling right now. BK has to be the only one in America that still believes that the Cardinals are good enough to make the playoffs. Why does he feel that way? Are we discussing acquisitions at the trade deadline seriously? This app seems to be something that I cannot listen to anymore. I don't understand what PK is talking about here. I don't think it's a tough needle for me to thread because I don't think that the Cardinals are very good. I don't. I think that they are average at best, and I think they have a ton of holes on this roster right now. And when you look at what Arenado and Goldie are doing, and you lack Wilson Contreras and Jordan Walker's back down in AAA, dude, that's a lot of right-handed bats that you were counting on that are not performing up to expectations or are unavailable currently. The reason why I still think the team is potentially going to make the playoffs is because of what's around them. And I'm not telling you got to be happy about that. I think it sucks. It's bad for baseball. It's bad for Cardinals fans. This is not a good situation to be in. It's the worst place to be in Major League Baseball is in the middle and stuck in the middle consistently for like 7 years. But yes, I do think they can still make the playoffs.
Of course you do.
To answer the question directly. I do.
Put the hat on. Put the hat on, Conductor BK.
Don't put the hat on. I think they can make the playoffs. It is the saddest
thing ever that they can make the playoffs. It's sad for baseball. It's a sad state of affairs for this stupid sport that we all love so much. That this team is good enough to make the playoffs.
Like the Cardinals.
And that hat falling off of my head is perfect.
But let's call a spade a spade. Yeah, they can make the playoffs. Are they going to do anything in the playoffs? I don't believe so because this is an average team.
I think you're right. But, dude, I've watched the playoffs and weird-ish happens. Yeah. And that's, again, bad for baseball as well, and it's why teams feel comfortable operating the way the Cardinals do of, hey, let's shoot for the middle, and if you get to the playoffs, weird stuff happens. Maybe a starter goes down for somebody. Like last year, I think it was, the Dodgers had like 0 starters available for them.
Lynn started a playoff game.
Yeah, and like suddenly whoever they go up against has a chance. And when you're playing in a 3-game setting like the wild card round is, you got a shot because weird stuff happens in a 3-game series.
I 100% agree with that weirdish happens when you get to the playoffs. But again, I want to go back to what I said. I felt like it was last week of those teams that made those runs that were the 6 seeds had the formula. They had 2 elite starters. They had a third guy that had swing and miss stuff. They had an electric bullpen, and they had a lineup that was deep.
I mean, the Cardinals might have those things other than the second starter. They're missing the second starter right now, but by the end of the season,
I think they're missing the elite lineup right now.
I think I could make a pretty easy case that they could end up having that by the end of the season. It's hard to see right now, but they could have a deep lineup by the end of the season that is reminiscent of 2013.
It's hard for me to see right now because I think this is what Goldie and Arenado are.
And that's a hard part.
And if this is what they
Goldie's
are,
been good,
they
by
can't.
the way. I think it's unfair that we continue to do this with Paul Goldschmidt.
I agree.
Goldie's been good as a complimentary piece, not as the team that is going to take you over the top.
More than a reasonable 3-hole hitter.
He's been what he should be, which is the best right-handed bat in the lineup
100%.
right now.
Goldie's
Don't have many of them, though.
Goldie for a month has been really good. Not prime Paul Goldschmidt. He's not what you were hoping for, but he's been really good. More than good enough for you to be able to make a run in the postseason if you have a really deep lineup around him. The problem for them is Nolan Arenado. And I don't know what to tell you there. There's nothing to believe in there. It's all bad. The batted ball data is bad. The actual numbers are bad. Everything, even the defense is slipping in the last month or so. I got nothing for you on Nolan Arenado, but hey, maybe Jordan Walker will be the guy that we thought Nolan Arenado could be by the end of the season.
Sure, yeah, for the Memphis Redbirds.
Yeah. Are
Coming
they
up
playoff
next.
bound?
No, God, no. Their roster's worse than the Cardinals roster.
Oh, that can't be.
They've got
it is.
Got a rotation full of stalled 4A players.
I think all three of your outfielders.
Mo made them know this.
I think all three of your outfielders are hitting below 250.
Oof. Coming up next, Bet It or Forget It here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. Alex, bet it or forget it. Paul Skenes will take a no-hitter through five innings tonight.
Oh, bet it. The only reason it's not going to be a no-hitter through 9 is because they're not going to let him pitch through 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told you what the stat line was against the Cubs a few starts ago. 6 innings, 100 pitches, 0 hits, 1 walk, 11 strikeouts. Cardinals fans, that's what that stat line is going to look like tonight.
I'm going to bet this, mostly because I saw this as a special bet.
And I will bet
on
it.
some betting
You're
websites.
planning to.
And I'm planning to bet this. So,
I might, by the way, throw a little.
I think I might throw 100 on that.
Venmo your.
Yeah,
I might throw a hundy on that.
Yeah, bet this. I'm not going to be that aggressive. You know, I need to go grocery shopping.
Hold on.
I'm gonna forget.
Here comes conductor BK. Choo, choo, choo. I think the Cardinals are going to put 3 runs up on them in the first
We're going to be
inning.
seeing ghosts tonight.
I think Burleson gets.
They're going to look like me on the golf course when I get pissed off at a ball. Just start whacking at it.
God, lefties are. It's
good.
impossible to hit this dude.
Yeah.
Batting 185 against him with a slugging percentage, Alex. A slugging percentage of 285.
Checks notes. 6 of the Cardinals batters are probably going to be left-handers tonight.
They might flip it because if they see this now, it's
Brandon
small
Crawford
sample
is so
sizes
plain.
on both. It's hard to do like a significant decision on this. But right-handed hitters have an OPS of 715. Lefties are at a 512. I don't know why that would be against him specifically, like why his pitches are playing that way. But maybe you'll see more right-handed hitters in the lineup tonight. Alec Burleson would be my guy. He hits fastballs well compared to the rest of the team. I think Alec Burleson ends up with a double tonight off of Paul Skenes.
I'm going to guarantee they don't throw more righties in the lineup. Ollie can't even figure out his freaking lineup against lefties.
What righties would you put in the lineup?
Whoa!
You're going to make sure Paje stays in and Fermin,
I have a fair
Crawford?
complaint against Ollie Marmol against left-handed pitching. Because you know where Arenado's been hitting against righties? 5th. You know where he hits against lefties for some freaking reason?
Because he's
4th.
He's an all-star and a Hall of Famer.
No, he's not. He's hitting 189 against left-handed pitching
the
this
second
year
one was
with a
correct.
502 OPS.
Hey, now,
Meanwhile,
you're an all-star.
Gorman has a 773 OPS, but because he's left-handed, he can't hit 4th against a lefty.
Hey, I'd like to manage against you.
Yeah. I heard Ollie.
See you sitting in the third row
By the way,
questioning
Nolan
me.
Gorman has
I'm
played
a
in.
kid at the candy shop right now.
I'll take you to the candy shop.
I don't think you know what that means. Nolan Gorman has played every single
talking
day
about, man?
since May 24th.
It's a great song by 50 Cent.
You ready for the off day today?
Oh, yeah. Brandon Crawford is so plain today.
You ready for Donovan's going to be at second base today? Carlson, Ciani, and
Pajes.
who else can you play in the outfield?
Burleson.
Fermin.
No, Burleson will be in the
Fermin's an
outfield.
outfielder
now. Yeah, there
Burleson
you
will be
go.
in the outfield. No, Fermin is probably going to be your DH.
Yeah, Fermin will be your DH.
Crawford at short, and then Pajes is behind
Hey,
the
you'll
plate.
buy the extra day. It'll be an off day for Mason Wynn today.
Oh, good. Good.
So there you go. Perfect game through 5. Alex, what do you got?
Better to forget it. A player that was playing in the playoffs this year will be playing for the Blues next season.
In the playoff? Like any team
from,
in the playoff?
From the 16 teams all the way up to the Stanley Cup final.
Bet it. I mean, I've just got a lot of outs here.
Yeah.
I've got half of the field. Half of the players in the league are eligible for me to be able to win this bet, so I'm going to go ahead and bet it. This is like minus 200 on the
They're not signing any of them, so you mean they're trading for them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
bet it.
exactly what I mean.
Cool.
I don't
Same
know
bet.
who, but I'll bet it. Maybe we get like a third liner from Toronto when we trade
Going to get
Benner
Baby
there.
Barkov?
Yeah.
Yes, so
I'll take
badly.
Baby Barkov.
I so bad.
Someone apologized and said, sorry, stupid question. Never stupid questions.
There
here on
are
BK
no
Ferrario.
bad questions.
That's true.
I mean, if they
Just
got
bad
into
thoughts.
a spot where they,
Yes.
for whatever reason, viewed Sam Bennett as like a must-have on their roster, and they wanted to bring back their pending UFAs, they would potentially get into a spot where they've got to make a move. And
Yeah, but I
that
mean,
could
like
be
that's
the thing that they have to
that's
do.
a-
I don't think that they're going to do
say
that.
that's a brutal way to run your organization to bet on a 28-year-old over a 22-year-old.
Yeah. Guys, bet it or forget it. We will see a sweep in both the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals.
Forget it.
I think Edmonton's winning game 3, and I think Dallas is winning game 3. I think you will see the home team. We're going back to the home stadium for each of those teams. I think the home team will win in each of those.
I could see it in the NBA, although BK, I know I don't watch the games.
It'd be nice if you did.
I don't think you can lose a game if you're Edmonton playing in Edmonton. You got to win one of them.
Well, they can.
No, they can't. You'll win one of them. Home field advantage, home ice advantage. I give them one of them.
I will forget this as well, but I can see it happening. If Edmonton loses this game, game 3, it's a sweep. And I think Dallas is going to get swept. I mean, Tatum didn't even have his best game in Game 2, and it still just felt like it was clearly Boston that was going to win that game. So I feel like Boston sweeps Dallas. I think Edmonton, the only reason that I give them a chance is because they've got one of the best players in the world in Connor McDavid, and he has not done anything in the series. I think at some point he figures it out and can win them a game.
You know how they're winning a game? Barkov doesn't play.
Or a power play goal.
Dude,
they're 0 in the series so far.
Hit 3 posts,
and they've given them every opportunity. It's what I told you going into the series. Like, I don't think Edmonton's power play is going to be successful because Florida has the ability to suffocate you, and then when they give you a chance or when they slip up, Bobrovsky robs you.
Something that I probably didn't give enough credit to was I wonder if the long layoff actually ended up really being beneficial for Florida because of the style of play that they have. Like, it allows them to just get back right physically. Whereas Edmonton, they don't play that grinded out style. They could have played immediately and been probably fine going into the next series.
How many Game 7s did Florida play in the playoffs?
Not many.
I think they went Game 6 versus the Rangers, Game 6 to the Boston Bruins. So, yeah, you've done Game 6s every single round if you're the Florida Panthers. You're right. That's exactly what's benefited them.
Yeah, I think it was 5 against Tampa, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, two more series that were 6 games. Yeah. I think it really helped them out a lot to be able to get that significant layoff.
And Edmonton had to go Game 7 with Vancouver.
Final. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Bet it or forget it, guys. The UFL will be back next season. I'm betting this. I talked about this yesterday with Randy. I do think it'll be back next year. Now, long term, I think there are some legitimate questions to be asked about the league. But I will bet it. I think that they will be back next year. I think they have to find a way to make it better experience in-game in non-St. Louis markets. And I think they need to make sure that they remember this is a TV product at the end of the day. But if they do those things, I think it can be around long-term. I'm betting it for next year.
Yeah, I'll bet this one too. I think hopefully you can build off of it, but I think I'd give them one more year. And if it doesn't have more success next season, I could see it going away after next season.
Yeah, I'd bet it for next year. The long-term sustainability just doesn't feel like it's there for me.
Better to forget it. Alec Burleson has 25-plus home runs this season. What is his current pace? He's at, 9 now? Is that right?
Yeah.
He's probably on pace for 20-ish.
He's on pace for 23 as of today. I will bet this.
I'm going to forget it because at some point, he's going to cool off. I think he's close, though. I didn't think he was going to be a 20 home run hitter, and I do believe he's a 20 home run hitter now.
I'll forget it. I think he'll get close. I did find it interesting of what Ali Marmol said about Burley, to where it is they've taught him to be more aggressive early in counts because he doesn't strike out a lot. So let it fly before you get to 2 strikes and then be able to adjust. So I'll say forget it for this year. If you told me he does it once in his career, I would bet it, though.
I would bet that, too.
Yeah.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we're diving into the junk drawer. But next, the Panthers got here the hard way. Can the Blues follow their lead? We'll talk about that here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you, talking to all of the business owners out there. If you've got a business where the exterior is worn down, if it needs a new look, then it's time to call Rhino Shield. Here's the thing. You don't want your business looking worn down when you're bringing clients there. When they walk in, they see the paint chipping off, rust stains, water stains. They're thinking, oh, man, this looks a little run down. That's why you get Rhino Shield. And look, there's been tons of businesses around the area that have used Rhino Shield. Metal supermarkets in O'Fallon, Illinois have used them for multiple jobs, for the siding, for the roof, because Rhino Shield changes the outlook of your building. Whether it's your home, whether it's your commercial building, they work on whatever type of material you have. It's a 2 to 3 coating process, ceramic coating that sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than you're going to get at any other shop. And it's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. If you've got aluminum, if you've got asbestos, block, brick, it works on all exterior. So give Darren a call today. Have him come out and let him show you why you need the coating of a Rhino on your exterior. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25rhino.com.
Terry Hendricks Near the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londow Chevrolet and Johnny Londow Autoplex. Cardinals back in action tonight as they start a 3-game set with the Pittsburgh Pirates. 6:45 will be first pitch. Paul Skenes will be on the mound for Pittsburgh. Miles Michaelis will get the start for St. Louis. The sports update driven by Johnny Londow Chevrolet and Johnny Londow Autoplex. See them at londow.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so the Panthers got here the hard way, man. They had to go about this, and they had to make trades that people looked at with a little bit of a side eye and said, hey, you trade Jonathan Huberdeau?
You going to trade a 100-point player?
You trade Mackenzie Weegar?
What the?
And then what? The answer is probably win the Stanley Cup. Alex, what they have done is committed to a style of play that wins in the postseason. And I don't know how many times, whether it was David Perron or Craig Berube, they came on these airwaves right here on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. We went Blues Day, by the way. It's tomorrow right here on 101 ESPN. And they would say there is a specific style that wins in the postseason. Everybody knows it. Very few are willing to commit to it. The Panthers have done that via their personnel decisions, going out and acquiring Matthew Tkachuk, getting these tree trunks of defensemen, and playing a grinding, physical style of hockey that has found a way to win last year in the postseason until all of their players were broken. And this year in the postseason, even through the first 2 games of the Stanley Cup final. Alex, what's the lesson there from the Blues, or for the Blues, if there is one in your mind that they can follow?
I mean, it's following somewhat of those guidelines. I think the biggest lesson to take away for me is when you have the opportunity to swing for a big player, you take it, because Florida was good. And as Pierre LeBrun put in his piece, like, they were an exciting team a few years ago, but they didn't get to this level until they traded for Matthew Tkachuk. Until they traded for Matthew Tkachuk was when they basically said, yeah, we feel like we're ready to change the mentality of this roster, because they were more of a possession type of team. I won't say that they were like a rush team, because they played a lot like the Carolina Hurricanes did when they had Huberdeau and Weegar and Barkov. But it wasn't until they went out there and they acquired Matthew Tkachuk that they basically said, yeah, we're done with that. We've got a Selke candidate, basically a Selke winner almost every single season. We've got a hard-nosed group of players. We need to go out there and get a guy who's a leader of the pack. And it felt like once they acquired Matthew Tkachuk, then they went and got Paul Maurice, who had the coaching in the playoffs mentality, and it feels like the roster just rounded out with what they were trying to accomplish. So to me, the lesson to be learned is when there's a player, which still stings, I'm sure, for Blues fans, when there's a player that can really change the dynamic of your roster, you've got to take that opportunity, no matter how tough it looks on paper.
I also think it's just like, you can't skip steps in your build. Look at what they did as a team, right? You go back to the 2020 COVID-shortened season. They lost that year in the qualifying round. They went 35, 26, and 8. They were a good team, but lost in the qualifying round. The next year, losing the first round. The next year, losing the second round. The next year, losing the Stanley Cup final. And finally, now here they are, right? Like, it takes time to build a winner like this. And you look back at that team from 2019, 2020, and you look at the forwards that they had, Alex, that they were building around. Dude, like, none of them still exist on the roster except for Barkov. Mm-hmm. He's the one guy that remains. Everything else has changed around him. They've been able to cycle through guys to find, okay, what is going to work? They had Mike Hoffman and Noel Acciari and Frank Vetrano and Jonathan Huberdeau. Like, they had some good players that are now top 9 forwards elsewhere, but they decided this isn't going to work. We can't build around this long term. We've got to find other pieces. And so even as recently as a couple of years ago, when they were a really good team, had 122 points during the regular season, won, if I'm not mistaken, the President's Trophy that year, they said this is still not good enough for us. We have to keep throwing assets at it. And that's what they've done. And they've built what is an unbelievable team. And I loved this quote that came from Paul Maurice after the game last night, where he said, playoff hockey is different. We talk about this in training camp. It's hard. The buy-in isn't from the coach. It's nothing that I've done. It's the players' willingness. So the running joke with the coach's office here is to be careful what you tell them, because they're going to do exactly that. We've worked very hard, I believe, for our veteran core over the last 2 years. This is game 204. We've been working really hard for 204 games to get to where we are right now. Play a style of game that you can once you get to the playoffs. I think that buy-in part is what stuck out to me the most, Alex. I do wonder, is that something that you can teach? Is it something that eventually is instilled in players, or is it just an intrinsic, like, you're either going to have guys that buy into it or won't? And I think that's something that the Blues, like, for me, that's the biggest lesson that I want them to learn from this team is find out your answer to that. Is this something that eventually you can get to with the right coach and the right messenger, or is it just something that guys either have or don't have? And if the answer is the latter, you got to get rid of the dudes that can't buy in. Yeah. And you got to move on from them as quickly as humanly possible and find guys that will, I don't know the answer to that question, though, and that's what I think they need to figure out.
And that's what I believe they are trying to figure out in this retool. And it's not just the guys they have on the roster now; it's the guys that are coming up into the system. Because look at who's also having success for the Florida Panthers. You've got an Anton Lindell, you've got a Luosterainen, who's been a depth piece for them. Like, as much as we're talking about the top players, because your best players are going to buy in no matter what. If there's winning tied to it, it's the complementary pieces. But I think, if you put the two conversations into what you just said, BK, of what we've been told playoff hockey looks like and how to have success in it, you're seeing the style of it right now. And then the players that we've seen for the Blues over these last couple of years, I don't think those two conversations mesh right now. I think you've got some guys that do it. Heck, there's still guys on the roster that were on that Cup team that know how to play. But what are they going to look like when you're back to competing? It's going to be more so the guys that are ready to take the Blues and be the faces moving forward. Are they willing to accept that role of being in the playoffs? Because I think the Blues played a lot like the Edmonton Oilers played in the regular season. Heck, the Blues beat the Edmonton Oilers 2 out of the 3 times they played them. You can't win in the playoffs like that. You have to win in the playoffs like this. And I think you're probably going to start finding out within the next couple of years, probably within the next 2, which meshes up with the timeline of Doug Armstrong placed on this team. You're going to find out if this is the roster that can play that style to win.
I do think it's worth noting, you mentioned Lundell. They've got him in a role that fits for a contender.
Yeah.
He's a third-line center.
He's what Barbashev was when the Blues won the Cup.
They're not asking him to be more than he is. And that is something that I do think, like, when you look at the Blues right now, they're asking guys probably to play 1 or 2 slots ahead of what they should be for a contender. If Anton Lundell was here, he would be your second-line center like that. And he's a really good center. You like having that guy. At this point in his career, he should be a third-line center. He can play in certain scenarios. Like yesterday, because Barkov got hurt at the end of the game, he was in some really critical moments late in that game because they needed him to be. But for the season, he's been asked to play less than 16 minutes a night. It's a good role for a third-line player that is 22 years old that they think can eventually be a star for them potentially. You got to get there. You got to get yourself to a place where your roster, when these young guys are coming up, it's not asking them to be something that they're not prepared to be at this point in their respective careers.
And they're
not there right now.
Yeah, well, they're not there right now, but they're not there also because they've got guys who can do roles that Lundell doesn't have to play. And right now, I don't know if you have guys on this roster that don't require other guys to step up. And what I mean by that is, like, when you don't have the guy who's the go-to goal scorer in big moments for you, you're asking other guys to do that, to provide too much, which now they can't play the role that they're supposed to play. That's where you got to find the guys like the Sam Reinharts, like the Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk is not trying to be Connor McDavid on the ice like he was last year, because there's other guys that are accomplishing that. Matthew Tkachuk is being the ish disturber and then backs it up with his offense. That's his role and what makes the team successful, and that's why you're seeing Florida run away with this.
So I did want to ask you one other thing about this, because people have brought up their defensive core is huge and the Blues' defensive core is small. And when you look at the comparison between the two, and they're not just big, they've got guys that play with a physical style. Like they make it hard for you to play against them. Even their guys on the blue line that are 6 foot or 6'1" and right around that 200 mark, they play differently than the Blues guys that are a similar size, like Nick Leddy and Justin Falk, for example. So when you look at them, and I asked this of Chris Kerber yesterday when he joined us on the opening drive, so when you look at the Panthers, they don't have that traditional number one defenseman that we think of, right? They don't have an Alex Pietrangelo, for example. They don't have a Cale Makar. They're going to be one of the first teams to win this way without that, the dude, capital T, capital D, in a long time. Aaron Ekblad is a really good defenseman. I think it's probably fair to say he's kind of more like Colton Parayko level. Like if you were looking at their overall ratings on NHL, the video game, they would probably be pretty similar in terms of their overall abilities.
Yeah.
What can the Blues learn from that, Alex, about how the Panthers were able to build around Ekblad?
I mean, when I watch the Florida Panthers defense play, they don't need a dude because all of them play a system that doesn't allow any opportunities to breathe. And what I mean by that is, like, when you have the dude, that's the guy that could go out there and play 23 minutes a night. When he's on the ice, you know what he's going to provide. They can split the time up between all three of their pairings because all three play such a shutdown style that you don't allow them to have space. They've got the physicality because even if, and I agree with you, like, I don't think Aaron Ekblad is the same level of an Alex Pietrangelo elite defenseman.
I think he's a top pair defenseman. I don't know if he's a number one defenseman.
What to me sets him over the top is Aaron Ekblad plays with a presence that is tough for other teams to find their way around. Like last night, he had Evan Bouchard in a headlock. And nobody goes to the front of the net because that guy's there. He's not going to put up 25 goals for you in the playoffs like a Makar. He's not going to be a guy that's eating 25 minutes a night like a Alex Pietrangelo. But they don't need that because it's a systematic approach where Forsland can go out there and play 18 minutes. You've got Brandon Montour who could play 18 minutes. Ekblad who can do that. Mikola's been doing that for them. They've got a top four that plays in a system that just doesn't allow opportunities to breathe. And that's what I also feel like the Blues did so well back in 2019. As much as we talk about Petro being the dude, Petro was playing with Carl Gunnarsson and Vince Dunn because they had Parayko and Bouwmeester who could go out there and also provide it. So I think the lesson to be learned there is you're going to have a systematic approach if you don't have an elite defenseman on your roster, which I don't believe the Blues are anywhere near that.
Yeah, you have to have an identity.
Yeah.
The Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
They know exactly who they are. And they are like if you were putting a spectrum of teams in the NHL, they would be on opposite ends of it. There's one team that plays one way, one team that plays another, and we can have our conversation about if one is more stylistically likely to win in the postseason or not, but ultimately they know who they are and they play to that style, and it's got them to the Stanley Cup final. So clearly it worked for both of them, just in very different ways. I don't think the Blues know who they are, and that's okay. They're at the early stages of whatever this retool or rebuild is going to be, but I think they probably need to determine at some point in the next year who they want to be, because the players that you bring in, the style of play that you try to implement is going to be really important for the next couple of years to get to that version of the team.
Yeah.
And that's what the next year or so, I believe, is ultimately going to be.
And you really can't emulate what the Florida Panthers are doing with their defensemen, because as much as we talk about their defensemen and how they play, I mean, more of the view of this team defensively as a whole is on their forwards. I mean, you've got two lines that have Selke candidates on it that are playing that shut down the other team's opportunities to score. Like, it's not the defense that's not allowing high-danger scoring chances at 5-on-5 last night. It's their offense suffocating Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
And the forecheck was unbelievable.
Yeah, so they don't allow. Your best offense or best defense right now is keeping the puck in the offensive zone, and Edmonton doesn't have an answer.
It is so overwhelming that it's what ended up that Bouchard the turnover that led to the Rodriguez goal. Mm-hmm. He's just trying to get it out as quick as possible. Just get away. And that decision was not made in that moment. That decision was made because of dozens of other plays that had taken place already in the game. He felt like he had no time and no space. He had to get rid of the puck as quickly as possible, get it out of the middle of the ice, and it goes on Rodriguez's stick, and then boom, it's in the back of the net in a second. And there was no way for Skinner to be able to track the puck. That's all caused because of the forecheck, because it's on you at all times. And that's just their identity. And they play to it every single night. That's where the Blues need to get to. All right, coming up next, let's get to the juncture here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, let's dive into the junk drawer. Alex, how's life going these days?
I am in the potty training world these days.
Oh, you're ready to do it now. At the age of 35, you decided it's time.
Right,
I said the Depends are kind of getting annoying, and I'm sick of speeding down the highway to try and get to a Walgreens to go in my pants, I just got to fix it. So, no,
I think I could do the Depends for pee. I don't think I could do the other. If I'm just being totally honest.
Is this conversation? All right, Alex, you were saying?
No. You think you could live with urine in your pants, but not feces?
Yeah, I don't think I could do the number 2.
Have you ever walked around with wet clothes?
Yeah, and I think you could do it. I think you can make it work. Like, obviously, you get it changed every once in a while. Like, kids don't just all day walk around with the same diaper. I don't know. Maybe you're doing that at home with your girls.
Sometimes, it's got to make sure.
Yeah, we change the diapers pretty frequently. I feel like I could get away with that.
No,
I don't feel like it would be the worst thing in the world.
I actually feel like I waste diapers in my house because, when my daughter, has, like the little blue, T-Bone doesn't know what I'm talking about, the little blue line on the diaper.
A little bit on the top. We could go ahead and change this one.
Yeah, I'm like, let's get this one off. And Katie's like, what are you doing? She's like, you don't want to throw those away. Let her fill it up. Anyway, potty training life. So
when you get older, you're going to wear Depends. You know that, right?
No. I've already discussed with my wife when we get to the Depends stage, put me down.
To have this conversation.
I wasn't either. I thought we were going with potty training.
You're going to get there before me, so you let me know.
I'm going to get there before everybody. Sounds like,
I don't know you by then.
Someone said sounds like a great pick'em punishment to let the loser have to walk around in their feces and urine all day, 24 hours without using the toilet.
I couldn't do the number 2, man.
No.
If you need me to pee on myself.
Speaking from somebody who has irritable bowel syndrome, I've lived that life a couple of times, and let me tell you something. It doesn't smell very good when you get out of your car.
On the side of the road, right by a power plant in St. Charles.
Dude,
if you ever see that, I apologize.
I've had to do it in the backwoods.
That was it.
It's been bad. All right. Anyway, my kid's potty training right now. BK's over here just disrupting me. We're at the point to where we're doing the fully nude stuff. So when you start not us, me and my wife, my daughter. So when you start the potty training, apparently you don't want them to keep their diaper on. You don't want them to have underwear on because they just feel like, okay, well, I got something covering it. Sure. So we're letting her just walk around the house nude because when she's got to go, we try and catch her before she actually goes. So she realized, put in the potty, and she's got to feel like what it feels.
Daddy, they took the dog outside, they put him out there and said, we are doing it doggy style.
Yeah, that's it. But this life is not fun because we've had to roll up our carpets. If you've had grandparents, T-Bone, I'm assuming your grandparents do this. They have the plastic all over the couches, and it is a nightmare watching my daughter as a hawk because she's just walking around the house nude, and there's just, every once in a while you're walking around.
Just waiting.
All times you're just waiting. But then when you turn your back, it's, there's a puddle. And sometimes you don't see the puddle until you step in the puddle. So for parents that have gone through this potty training, I don't know if it's this difficult for everybody, but I don't see an end in sight.
Oh, I mean, I did it with a dog, which is obviously different than a child.
As I've heard.
It took us a little bit from that, too. By the way, that was Bruce Almighty. Damn it. Bad reference by me.
Thanks, Dad.
Know your damn movies, man. But she did poop on the potty today, though, because when she has to go.
But you had to be in the room with her.
That's the thing. She needs somebody to be in there with her because my kid is a talker. Surprise, surprise. She's got to have somebody to have a conversation with her. And some kids I've heard, they want privacy. No, my kid. She's like, Daddy, come in here and sit. And so while we're sitting waiting for her to poop and she doesn't understand it, that, sometimes it takes a while, I had to sit there for 15 minutes today.
Luca is already in the I need privacy when I'm pooping mode.
Good for him,
He will go under a table.
Oh, that's my youngest.
Go into
that's my youngest.
quadruped mode, and he's like, I'm just going to be here for a minute. I'll see you guys in a moment. So we can tell when he's getting ready to have his moment.
Yeah, let me I'll let you know when the end goal is made, but I have a feeling we're going to be in this nude stage for a few days.
Well, good luck, man. Give us an update. We'll see where you're at.
I just hope we get there sooner rather than later, because then got 2 more to figure
out. Somebody on the text line, by the way, said girls much easier than boys.
That's what I've heard
when it comes to potty training.
That's what I've heard. It's just a matter of getting her to focus on actually having to go, because I think my kid just enjoys going on the hardwood floor.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone on BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into NFL quick hitters with a quarterback who's skipping his mandatory mini camps. I'm sure this will go over super well. No controversy whatsoever associated with it. We'll get into that in a little bit. But next, have the Cardinals lost their luster as a free agent destination, or is this storyline once again getting overstated? I think we have differing perspectives on this. We'll get to it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb, who's been taking care of the Ferrario family when it comes to your insurance coverage. And I'm sure people listening right now have insurance, and you've probably never even spoken to the insurance agent that you have. That's what appeals me about Tracy Bibb and why she's so great, because that customer service to me is important. Because, look, things are going to happen, fender benders, things with your house, flooding in your basement. My brother-in-law went through that a couple of months ago, and when he did, he called his insurance agent, had to wait 2 months before they finally got back to him, and by that time he had to solve it himself. Get with the insurance agents that they're for you, and that's Tracy and her team. All you got to do is give her a call and mention my name, Alex Ferrario. Her and her team will walk you through the entire process, a free non-committal estimate, and if you go with Tracy Bibb, they'll cancel your insurance for you. Don't have to do anything. Tracy's there to take care of you. 314-328-4260, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Alex, I'm going to read you a headline. This comes from Redbird Rants. St. Louis Cardinals are no longer a desirable team to play for, according to the players. They then go on to rant for the vast majority of this story about how it used to be the spot that players wanted to play, and no longer is that the case. This is according to a player poll that was taken over at The Athletic. They do this every single year. It's always really interesting to get the thoughts of Major League Baseball players on many different questions, including who's the most overrated player in baseball. They appear to believe that the answer to that question is Jazz Chisholm. Who's the best player in baseball? Shohei Ohtani was ranked as the best player in baseball according to the players that were polled in this, between 90 and 100 players, depending on which question that you ended up asking them. They then were asked, though, if you take away the team, the roster, and taxes, contracts, so if money and the current roster was not a factor, which team would you most want to play for, Alex? Here are the teams that received votes going from the most to the fewest. The Braves, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Rangers, the Yankees, the Cubs, the Padres, the Phillies, the Diamondbacks, the Angels, the Astros, the Marlins, the Reds, the Rays, the Mariners, the Giants, the Mets, and the Twins.
Oh, so every other team.
Even the Angels were ahead of
Even the A's.
It is noteworthy that the Cardinals were not listed among those teams. And Alex, among the factors that players said that they would take into consideration here, one, hometown. That was a big factor for many of them.
Makes sense.
2, history, like going to play for the Yankees. There's a lot of history there. Going to play for the
I do love the history
Red
of the
Sox.
Angels.
There's a lot of history there. And 3, lifestyle, right? Hey, I would like to live in Chicago, in Miami, in Los Angeles, in Houston, big metropolitan cities, most of which are on the coasts. The Cardinals do not fit into any of those other than the history side of things. And it seems like for a lot of players, the history is more tied into the ballpark than it is the actual history of that team. Mm-hmm. So, Alex, when I read that story that was about it from Redbird Rants, I thought to myself, have the Cardinals been a desirable team to play for recently? For free agents. I'm not talking about for guys that get traded here and experience it and are a part of it first and then either sign extensions here or decide to stay here based upon opting into a contract. Not talking about that. I'm talking about for free agents that are able to go anywhere that they want to. Have we overstated how much of a destination St. Louis has been in the past? Because I can't think of a lot of like star-level free agents that the Cardinals have signed or, frankly, even been all of that much of a part of their free agency sweepstakes. So how do you view this? When you see a question like this asked and the Cardinals are not involved, do you feel like it has changed or do you feel like it's a continuation of what we have seen?
I feel like it's a continuation of what we've seen. I don't know if it's ever been the destination that everybody wants to come play for. And I think when fans say that, they originally think like, oh, man, well, the Cardinals were able to bring in all of these guys like Jim Edmonds and Scott Rowland and Larry Walker and the mid-2000s and early 2010s. Like they were able to bring in those free agents, and now they're not. I personally fall into that because I just don't remember or I can't recall the correct way. Like they never really acquired these guys via free agency. It's been always trades. Now, the hard part with this with the Cardinals is they're never in on these guys. So I never really know if the players want to be in St. Louis or not, because I don't even think the Cardinals are picking up the phone calling these free agents and saying, hey, we want you here. Because even John Mozeliak has used the terms in the past of, well, we want guys that want to play for us. So he's not even calling these big team free agents. Yeah. So when we talk about the most recent ones and Wilson Contreras, well, why did Wilson sign here? Well, because he talked about Yadier Molina was one of his heroes and talking about how I wanted to be with a team like Yadi was, and I want to win here. And he saw a lot of the NL Central. Sonny Gray signed here because he believed that he could win the World Series with this team, which credit to him. But didn't he also say that there were only like 3 teams that he chose that he wanted to sign with?
Cincy, St. Louis, and Atlanta, it was because of it, they were all the closest teams to his hometown.
So hometowns there. So I don't have a whole lot of examples to show you like, oh, the Cardinals tried to get this free agent and he didn't want to come here. But I don't know if the Cardinals have ever really swam in those waters, maybe since the early 2000s.
Yeah, and even then it was trades. It was trades for guys that had term left on their contract, at least another year, and then they would re-sign here, like Jim Edmonds and Mark McGwire. That was kind of the start of what became their model for a number of years. They trade for Scott Rowland. They end up trading for a bunch of guys like Matt Holliday. Trade for him, got a year left, and then he ends up opting out of free agency.
That's what you did.
You to stay here.
You got guys who want to stay here by bringing them in, and Mo has said that before.
Yeah, that's their model, and it's smart because I think playing in St. Louis is something that you have to experience to really appreciate. Like, when you are going to the ballpark every single night, and this hasn't necessarily been the case to the same degree this year, but it generally speaking has been in the past, and maybe this is where it's losing its luster a bit, but we'll get to that here in a second. Being able to go to the ballpark and having a full crowd every time that you played there is something that very few markets can really say. It exists elsewhere. There are other places that fill their stadiums every single night, but it's just few and far between. There's not a lot of them. And playing in a place like this where the Cardinals are the #1 storyline in town, dude, that is very rare. Like the biggest story, for example, in Atlanta is the Georgia Bulldogs. The biggest story in New York, yeah, the Yankees are a big deal. Dude, football season and basketball season, they take a little bit of a backward step. Biggest story, for example, in Boston, especially when the Patriots were doing what they were doing, it was the Pats. Biggest story in LA is whatever is going on entertainment-wise. It's not the Dodgers. They're a secondary storyline.
Yeah, BK proved that when he stayed at the restaurant instead of seeing Albert hit the home run.
Biggest story in St. Louis is the St. Louis Cardinals every single day. They are the #1 topic of discussion among St. Louis residents on a regular basis. And so that is something that when you're not here, it's really hard to understand. It was hard for me to understand that before I moved here, Alex. And once you're in it, it's different. And there's a lot of guys that really appeals to. A guy like Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, it appeals to those kinds of players. It appealed to Jim Edmonds. It appealed to Scott Rowland. It appealed to guys that they trade for like Matt Holliday and keep here. It didn't appeal that much to Jason Hayward. Wasn't something he was interested in. He wanted to go play for a young core in a bigger market to get his opportunity to shine there. Didn't want to spend the rest of his career. That's fine. Different players have different aspirations. They have different things that appeal to them. I just think that sometimes we do this thing. It's been a topic of discussion here since I moved here in 2016. Every single year for 8 years now, we've been having the conversation of, are the Cardinals still a free agency destination? For a lot of players, no. It's just the honest to God answer. They're not. But if they offer the most money, they can be. And that's something the Cardinals are unwilling to do most of the time. So I don't know that anything has really changed in the last decade other than just like they're not offering the most money, man. So yeah. I think that's a big part of it. The one thing they do have, though, or have had, you can always say you're in contention. If you come here, you're going to be in contention every single season that you're a part of the roster. That right now is not the case. And they can always say our stadium's going to be packed. That right now is not necessarily the case. So the two things that appeal to guys that you could trade for and then keep here long term, those are on the precipice. And that is something that 5 years from now, if we're having this same conversation, we could be talking about you're not doing the free agency thing and the old route of trading for guys, keeping them for a year and then extending them long term. That might not be as appealing to players as well. That is when you've got a problem. But right now, I don't think a whole lot in terms of how they operate has changed.
I do think that those guys that you've acquired via trade and said, like, this is a good spot to be, I want to stay here. I do feel like a lot of those players, too, had the Albert Pujols effect to where, like, yes, you loved being able to play here, but you also had the best player in the game that you could be a part of that roster. And it accelerates your opportunity to win a championship to the contention point that you made. But I don't think you still have that effect now, that even if you're trying to sell guys that you acquire via trade, you don't have the player that everybody wants to play for. That's on other teams right now.
I think you still have the effect of if you trade for those guys to potentially keep them because you still can sell the idea that you can win in this division. Sure. 15 years ago, I totally agree with you. I think there would have been some of the, man, I can stay here where we're winning baseball games and I get to play alongside one of the best players ever to do it, and Albert Pujols, and we have a shot to win a championship any year that guy's on the roster. I think that was definitely the case 15 years ago. Now I still think it is unless they go through a really long trend of, hey, we can't acquire you, you like it here, we'll sign you to a contract extension, we're going to have a chance in this division every single year. The Reds are never going to be a sustainable model long term. The Cubs haven't proven to do that. The Pirates certainly are that. And Milwaukee's such a small market team that they're not going to spend big dollars as well. So we always have a chance in the NL Central to bring guys in, try and lock them up. But that is the one part that I totally agree with you, BK. That's one where I would start to get concerned. The two areas where I would start to get concerned is if you're not winning and not having a full house on a consistent basis, you lose that luster for the guys that you trade and bring in and try to give a contract extension to once you get them here, and the second-tier market on free agency. Sonny Gray was a guy that said he wanted to be here and wanted to win because, A, it was close, but 2, he felt like he could win. Yep. If you start to lose on that second-tier market where the Cardinals do all their shopping, that's when it becomes a problem. When you start to bring those guys in and can't get them to contract extensions, that's when it's a major problem.
That's where it gets hard. You have to be able to sell something to these players. Now, the number one thing for every player that hits the market is money. It's the number one thing. It's the number one thing for a lot of people in our lives, right? If you're deciding, hey, where do I want to work? Well, what's the offer? That's how I can tell you, first of all, where I want to go. And secondarily, a lot of it is family factors. What gets me closest to my family, whether it's immediate or extended? For many of us, that's why we're where we are. I'm in St. Louis because my wife's family is here. Alex, your family is here. T-Bone, your family is close to here. Like that's why we chose to be a part of this community. Part of why Lance Lynn is here, and Kyle Gibson, and Sonny Gray is because family ties are here, right? Wilson Contreras came here because he wanted to win. He wanted to succeed, Yadier Molina, and he wanted to win. That's a different kind of selling point, but you got to have those. If you have something you can sell, you're in a good place. The Cardinals right now, though, if things continue to go on this downward spiral, you could be at risk of losing that. The last thing that you have as a card to play for guys is you can win here. If you can't say that anymore, if other teams are able to do that to a greater degree than you and are offering more money than you, it becomes a really hard selling point for a lot of these players. He's Alex, that's T-Bone on BK. NFL Quick Hitters is next here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I got to tell our friends about Circa Sports in the state of Illinois because this is where you're going to be getting the best odds. I've been loving betting on the NBA Finals, the Mavericks versus the Boston Celtics. So far, Celtics up 2-0. I think that changes in game number 3. Right now, if you go over to the FanDuel Sportsbook, for example, you're getting the Mavericks at -126. You do it over on the Circa Sports app, you're getting a little better odds. I love betting over there, whether you're looking for overs or unders, you're looking for money lines. That is where I think they have the best offers possible for you. When you bet over on Circa Sports, Alex, you're going to get the best odds possible.
I always do the big parlays on my Circa Sports Illinois app, BK, because I'm making sure I'm bringing in the most money possible, making sure that the betting side is not limiting me based off of those winnings. Now, does it happen often? Probably not. If you took my parlay yesterday, you know I fell 2 legs short. But here's the thing. I'm always in it to get the most money possible, and that's why I only use Circa Sports Illinois. They also got customer service, which is incredible. You're talking to real people, not robots. Make sure you use the right app, the app that BK and I use exclusively, and that's Circa Sports Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. Alex, we have some news in the NFL today.
Oh, good.
Mandatory mini camps are taking place right now.
This is important stuff right here.
It is. And this is the first time where if you don't show up, you're getting fined. Ooh. This is no longer OTAs where guys can kind of come and go as they please. This is the mandatory part of things. And Aaron Rodgers, according to Rich Cimini of ESPN.com, is not attending minicamp. It is, quote, not excused, according to Robert Saleh. Therefore, he is subject to a fine. Saleh said that Rodgers had a previous engagement in an event that is, quote, important to him.
Okay, so 2 things. Campaigning or darkness retreat?
100%.
Yeah.
This has got to be a campaign.
My guess is the campaigning.
My guess is darkness retreat.
No, I think you've already done that, you know? You've done enough darkness retreats that you plan those properly. You know when minicamp is.
Robert Saleh was asked if he's disappointed by Rodgers' absence, even though it's unexcused. Quote, no, again, selfishly, I want all of our guys here all the time, but when you get these mandatory things, you make the best decision for yourself. Obviously, selfishly, we want them all here all the time, but he made a decision, and that's where he went.
Boy, I feel bad for Saleh.
Oh, yeah, that sucks, man. At least Zach Wilson's not there.
There are certain guys that just have to be at these things. And the quarterback are those guys. If you're Aaron Rodgers, you got to be at this stuff. Like it's just it is something that with that position, with that money comes this responsibility. You've got to be made available when your team is out there busting their ass at OTAs, especially the mandatory ones. That's it. Man. It's as simple as that. And if this ends up coming out where he's at some like RFK rally tonight, dude. That's going to be a hard thing to sell to your teammates. It's going to be a really hard thing to sell to your teammates.
Especially when that's the leader of the pack. I don't know if players that are... Yeah, you see what I did there? Thank you. I don't know if players are going to be gung-ho about their quarterback missing for campaigning and then show up and be like, hey, guys, sorry, this was important.
You're sorry about that.
Yeah. Sorry you went through minicamp yesterday in the heat, but this was important.
Makes me feel better. I'm feeling great.
This is the guy that a couple of weeks ago, while they were at OTA, said they got to get rid of all of the distractions. Like, dude, looking around, like, who do you think is causing the distractions?
I can't buy that BS if Aaron Rodgers is still a part of the team.
Yeah, and It would be one thing. No, there isn't one thing. This isn't excusable at all. It's not like he just missed all of last season. Like, what are you doing? You've been out for an entire year with one of the hardest injuries to come back from in sports, a torn Achilles, at that age, by the way. What are you doing? You should be at that practice.
And it's not like these come out of nowhere. Like somebody on the text line said, guys, what if he's recording something like Jeopardy episodes? Dude, these dates are announced. You can work around them.
Do Jeopardy when you're, what's that thing called when football players don't play? Oh, yeah, retirement.
Or what's that thing called? Injured for an entire season.
Or 2 weeks from now. Like, the schedule is known. This isn't something that just pops up, right? Like, Alex, your kids have birthdays, right? Those are on the calendar?
Yeah, but I never know when they fall.
Sure. If you went to your wife and said, hey, I've got a boys' weekend, the weekend of one of your daughter's birthdays, your wife probably wouldn't be too thrilled. She's like, why don't you do it like the weekend before or the weekend after? You're like, well, that was it scheduled. She'd be like, yes, it was. That's what's happening here with Aaron Rodgers. It's on the calendar.
Yeah, but minicamp wasn't on his, but it wasn't on his calendar.
Yeah.
Good point.
See,
so if I don't put it on my calendar, it's not a thing. And guess what, Robert Saleh? I've got more important things to do, like run the country.
I just don't understand.
I do. Aaron Rodgers is a disaster, and the Jets will be a disaster.
How many games do you think the Jets win this year?
6.
You think they're worse this year with Aaron Rodgers than they were last year?
How many did they win last year? 7, 8?
Yeah, this version of Aaron Rodgers? No, I mean, I think they'd probably win 8 games. I don't think you're any better than that.
I would go 8 or 9 would be where I would put them.
Interesting. I'm going to go 10. I think they end up making the playoffs, but I think they're a wild card team.
Is he going to be there?
I still think Aaron Rodgers is going to blow out another piece of his body.
Does he have the playoffs in his calendar? Because that's going to be really awkward if he's got something going on that weekend.
Well, it is January, so there will be
there's actually something going on there.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop myself. All right. How long do you stick with a coach who's shown an ability to keep you afloat, but has not won a playoff game in the last 7 years? It's a question that the Steelers...
I thought this was a Cardinals question for a minute.
Felt like one, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
It's a question that the Steelers have officially answered when they decided yesterday to extend Mike Tomlin for the next 3 seasons. According to a radio host out in Pittsburgh, the expectation is that contract will be worth roughly $20 million per year. He will be the second highest paid coach. Again, this is according to a radio host in Pittsburgh. He might be the second highest paid coach in the NFL.
Dan Hurley's wishing he would have done football.
Alex, how do you view Mike Tomlin right now? Obviously a good coach. He's taken these teams that are middling at best, and every single one of them has finished above 500. But last time they won a playoff game was in 2017.
Yeah.
How do you view him currently?
I view him as a good head coach, but I don't believe he is one of the highest paid coaches in the NFL. Should be. I think he's a great leader. I think he finds the way to get the best out of a really bad team, but I don't need a coach who's at best going to get me to a game or 2 above 500. I need somebody where there's an upside with it. And for Mike Tomlin, I think you've seen what the upside looks like, and it's when you give him a great roster, he's going to have some success with it. But he hasn't had a great roster, and I don't think he's going to have a great roster for a few years. So I would have gone a different direction. I love Mike Tomlin. I think he has success. But I think if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you got to look for some type of different voice than what it's been over these last however many years.
Yeah, it's so tough to judge Mike Tomlin because it's really impressive what he's done with the Pittsburgh Steelers and keeping them above 500. With that being said, he's almost hurting the Pittsburgh Steelers by keeping them above 500. And I understand what you're saying where they should build a better roster. And I totally agree with that because I think if you gave him any roster that we feel like is a playoff caliber roster, he can take it to the next level because I think he is that good of a coach. He wasn't in my top 5 when we had the conversation of the coaches last week just because I can't give him credit for not being in the playoffs and not winning in the playoffs that much. So I understand why they did it because if you have that guy, you don't let him go. The problem is are you going to build a good enough roster to really utilize Mike Tomlin the way that you should?
I just look at the quarterbacks that they've had. The corpse have been Roethlisberger, Mason Rudolph, Duck Hodges, Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky.
They've got 2 great quarterbacks this season. What's going to be your excuses now?
Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and I like Justin Fields, but I think they're going to play Russell Wilson. I wouldn't expect any other coach to do much better than what he's done so far. And so I think it's the right decision to keep him for the next 3 seasons, keep him internal, and hopefully you're able to get the roster that he's able to maximize. Man, when you're doing what they're doing, it just becomes so difficult to evaluate the head coach. And he's done a good job, an objectively really good job with the roster that he's been given. Until they get a quarterback, though, I don't know how I could possibly look at that and be like, he's the best coach in the NFL, or he's not among the top 5 coaches in the league. It's really hard to win with the roster they've given.
Nobody believed Jared Goff was a good quarterback, and Dan Campbell found a way to make that team really good.
He took his team to the Super Bowl, though, with the Rams.
I get it, but even at that point, people were like, Jared Goff's not good enough to get you beyond there.
I'm certain the quarterbacks that they've had are not good enough.
I'm not disagreeing with you there, but what I'm saying is, like, Jared Goff was viewed as, like, yes, he got them to a Super Bowl, but Jared Goff was viewed as a above-average quarterback.
Where will Tomlin rank? Because I was kind of thinking of this in my head, kind of to the regards on Goff there. Where will Mike Tomlin rank as an NFL head coach if he can get Justin Fields to get to that next level? I'm not saying win a Super Bowl with him,
He'll be in the top 5.
but let's say that he can make him a 10, 11 win quarterback like Goff is.
Yeah, he would be a top 5 coach in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think he might already still be in there, but if he's able to do something and raise the game of Justin Fields, and that's the one thing that's been missing is the quarterback play. If he's able to do that, top 5 coach in the NFL. All right, a little bit of NBA news to pass along here, heading into game number 3 of the finals. The Celtics just announced that Kristaps Porzingis day-to-day with what is considered to be a serious leg injury, according to Joe Mazzulla, the head coach of the Boston Celtics. He's, quote, doing anything and everything he can to be able to play in this game, but his availability is very much in question heading into game number 3. If he is out for the rest of this series, that is a massive blow for the Boston Celtics. I think that Dallas is winning game 3, and if he's out for an extended period of time, it becomes much more difficult for the Celtics to be able to finish off that series the way that they were hoping to, because he opens up everything for them offensively.
Yeah.
They also just have a really short bench. They're playing like 8 guys right now, and 6 of them really have significant minutes. That'd be a big loss for them heading into game number 3. All right, coming up next, the NHL announced the other day a significant boost in the salary cap for the first time in quite some time, since pre-COVID, basically. They're also expecting a 5% increase every single year thereafter. Alex, does that change at all your belief on if the Blues should re-sign Pavel Buchnevich long-term? We'll talk about the cap increase, how it affects Bucci next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. I went through the process like many of you have of booking online, going in, having my first appointment. I had my blood draw last Thursday. I wanted to get my micronutrient levels checked. I do a lot of running. I want to make sure I'm putting myself in the best position to be able to succeed. I've got a little one running around at home right now. Let's find out, what am I missing out on by going out and finding out exactly where all of my micronutrient levels were. It's a super easy process. I can't believe how quick and easy they made it for me. I booked now online. They immediately got back with me and said, hey, here's what we've got. What's your availability look like? I booked my first appointment, and then when I went in to get my blood draw, they already booked my next appointment for my consultation that I've got with their in-house person that's going to help me out and go over all of the numbers with me. It's a super easy thing to do. They're going to help you unlock your inner champion the same way that they are for me. It's Victory Men's Health, 4 great locations across the St. Louis area and at victorymenshealth.com.
Terry Hendricks near the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals back in action tonight as they start a 3-game set with the Pittsburgh Pirates. 6:45 will be first pitch. Paul Skenes gets the start for Pittsburgh. Miles Michaelis will be on the mound for St. Louis. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
So, Alex, right now I'm over at capfriendly.com, a website that I've become well accustomed to and that I'm going to miss dearly.
It's owned by the Capitals.
It has become such a huge resource for us here on the show. And the Washington Capitals recently purchased capfriendly.com. And it appears that they're just going to take it offline. Just take all of this data that was a great source of public information for fans, for media alike. We can go over there and I can immediately check, okay, where do the Blues pick? Which picks do they have? Not just for this year, but for future seasons. Who has options where they can be sent down to the minors? Who has a no trade clause? Who has a no move clause? What money do they make now and for the future? And maybe most importantly, what's the cap space look like? You can do that for every single team around the league, and it appears that that's going away. It's a terrible move, in my opinion, by the NHL. I don't understand it at all, but that is one thing that happened yesterday.
I guess
that was
you and I should just give up then. If we don't have this to reference, then what's the point?
I think Puckpedia is...
Puckpedia. I said Tito... Try this again. Today, Junior, I know. I told T-Bone and Grant yesterday, Hockey DB should capitalize on that. Like, Hockey DB is already where everybody goes for their stats and junior players and what they're doing. Now you need to pounce and put contracts and your options and things like that on it.
Yeah, so...
But then they'll get purchased by another team, and then they'll take it away.
I bring that up because the cap became another conversation yesterday. And that is because over the weekend they announced $88 million. That's what the salary cap's going to be for 2024. Now, that was expected. We had a pretty good idea. It was somewhere between $87.5 and $88 million. And it ended up on the high end of that, Alex, because I think they got more revenue than they were expecting from the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
So it goes around and you get a little bit of a boost there, a little bit more room in the cap. The more important thing, though, is what they said about future years. They're anticipating a 5% rise in the cap every year, basically thereafter. So this means, you get into 2026, 2027, and you're talking about a pretty big boost compared to what it was over the past few seasons post-COVID. Alex, as it pertains to the Blues, this could potentially have an effect on their interest level in Pavel Buchnevich. He's going to be an upcoming free agent next year. Does the rise in the cap and the percentage of cap that he will take up going down every year on a long-term deal, does that change at all your interest level in signing Pavel Buchnevich long-term?
It does.
Interesting.
Because I for some reason, I just did not put the numbers to look at it with a bigger picture on this one. But I mean, if you start with the 2026-2027 season just off of Cap Friendly of what their roster looks like, I put it together. You'll have 8 players on entry-level contracts with the exception of 2 guys that are kind of in that bridge deal with Bolduc and Dean. The only players that you'll have on longer contracts would be Thomas Kyrou, Shen, Toropchenko, and Neighbors. And I mean, you're talking about maybe somewhere between like $27 and $29 million with those guys. Now, it's only 5 players in your forward position, but I just listed off 8 entry-level contract guys, some who could be top 6 like Dvorsky and Snuggerud, some who could be 3rd and 4th line players like a Bolduc or a Kaskamaki or a Prokarchik, things like that. So you're in a hell of a position to capitalize on somebody that we've argued if he's a top-line player, if he's a second-line player. If I'm paying him $8 million because I don't believe this extension would be north of what Kyrou and Thomas are making, it's not how Army operates. I mean, you're talking about one guy that is probably right around $8 million on a second line that's still going to be cost controlled for how he looks, and you're going to have ample money to spend elsewhere to build around it. So in the short term, I just don't like the idea of it because I think you could probably get something better via trade. But if nothing's coming back in return that's younger, that makes more sense for your ideal situation in this retool, knowing that this cap is going to be somewhere between $95 and $97 million in 2 years, and with the roster that you have in place, you'll have a total of like $40 million in the books with a ton of entry-level contracts. Yeah, Buchnevich is probably one of those complimentary pieces that for $8 million, my gut would tell me he's going to be less than that. I would probably look at that and say that's a win in my book because I'm surrounding it with younger, cheaper players.
I still am on the stance of I would still look to move him because it's not so much the money that is going to be the problem for Buchnevich, it's the term. And do you want to give that guy going into his near his 30s, going on an 8-year contract for a guy that doesn't really match the timeline of a Robert Thomas and a Jordan Kyrou, not in that age frame. So for me, it doesn't really change much for me. I think the more money you have available once you start to get into that winning window, that $8 million, let's say, if that's what the contract ends up being, I think that's more valuable to go out there and sign somebody that will fit in with Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, Snuggerud, Dvorsky, those complementary pieces. I just don't think Buch fits the timeline for the St. Louis Blues. 3 years of that contract is probably not going to end up being worth it because you're not in a winning window and you just signed him to this long-term deal. I think you capitalize on this and you gain more assets from a Pavel Buchnevich trade.
So let's say that the cap's $97 million in 2026, 2027. If Buch signs for $8 million, if my math is correct here, that's an 8% cap hit towards your roster.
For context, this year Robert Thomas was at 9.
Yeah. So you're going to be talking about paying, and just to go back and look when the cap was with Alexander Steen, when the Blues were competing and everyone looked at that as a tough contract, he was 7.6% against your cap at the time that the Blues were winning the Cup for what you were paying him. So you're essentially going to be paying Buch what you were paying Alexander Steen. The question is, and I do find myself still on T-Bone's side because my first step is you got to agree to my terms. I'm not going to sign you to an 8x9 contract. That's probably what Buch would look at because I probably could get that on the market when I hit free agency. But if I can get you somewhere around 7.5 for 6 years, I'm changing my stance on that because, man, as much as I think you could get something in return that helps you, if not, Buch is a good piece to have for the next 6-7 years if the cap goes up that significantly and you're paying so many guys entry-level contracts when you're ready to compete.
Yeah, for me, and this has always been the case for it all comes down to what you're getting in return. I don't want a future asset for Pavel Buchnevich. That's not what I'm trading him for. If I'm trading Pavel Buchnevich, it's for something that will help me for now and for the future. If I'm trading that dude, I'm trading him to a team like Carolina, where they've got a guy in Martin Necas who's a good player right now and has the potential to be a top 6 forward on a contender moving forward. And he fits into my age range. He fits into my cap situation. Like, everything about Martin Necas makes sense for the St. Louis Blues. And everything about Pavel Buchnevich, honestly, makes a lot of sense for the Carolina Hurricanes. That's a deal I'm willing to make. Mm-hmm. If there's a young defenseman that is like 1 or 2 years into their career and has legit top 4 potential, already can play up there and has the potential to be a top pair defensively long term, that's a guy I'm willing to move Pavel Buchnevich for. If we're talking like number 1 picks, if we're talking prospects, I don't know that that's something that I'm all that interested in, honestly. Too far away, especially if it's a defensive prospect or if you're planning to take a defenseman in the first round. Nah, man, that's 4 or 5 years down the road where I'm finally going to be able to see them. We just talked earlier with JR about Nico Mikkola and how long it has taken him to become the player that he now is. For some of these guys, it's 10 years post-NHL draft for them to become the fully formed version of themselves. Drafted at 18, end up becoming really good players at 28. I'm waiting until 2034? No, that's not what I want. Not for Pavel Buchnevich. If I'm going that route, I would rather just extend him because he's a good player. And I know he's somebody that I can build around. It'll be harder, but I would rather have Pavel Buchnevich than a future asset on this team right now. That's my personal preference. So it really does come down to me on what are the offers.
Yeah.
What are teams offering you? And if it's something that can help you now and into the future, that's something I'm pouncing on.
Yeah, I still believe that if I got a top 10 pick offered to me and Buch wasn't willing to sign under my terms, I would consider that because I think that player can help you sooner than what people would expect the timeline to be. But other than that, I'm with you. You got to give me a position player, but I also got to make sure the term's right. I'm not going 8 years with Pavel Buchnevich unless the AAV is like $6 million. But if you're him, that's dumb. I don't know.
6 years makes a lot of sense.
I think 6 years,
get the AAV up.
$7.5, $8 million, I think, is where it's at. And knowing that the cap's going up to that position, yeah, I would strongly consider that because it does benefit your team long term.
All right, coming up next, we're going to get into the BK and Ferrario Rewind. But right now, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We've got your chance this week on the opening drive, the balloon party, and BK and Ferrario to score a pair of tickets to see Def Leppard, Journey, and Cheap Trick on July 6th at Busch Stadium. That is my baby boy Luca. It's his birthday.
Oh, I thought he was going to say Cheap Trick's his favorite band.
No. Tickets on sale right now, or you can text in at 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line to win free tickets right now here on BK and Ferrario. Alex earlier today had to be late because his daughter is learning a new skill. What is Alex teaching to his daughter right now? If you were texting number 101 with the correct answer, you are getting that pair of tickets to see Def Leppard and Journey with Cheap Trick. Coming up next, we're going to get into the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, we'll finish the show where we started it today, which is, hey, the Cardinals are going up against one of the most entertaining players in Major League Baseball so far this season. Paul Skenes on the mound for the Pirates tonight. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. You look around the National League Central, there are not a lot of guys that when they are on the mound or at the plate, they legitimately impose fear in the opposition. Paul Skenes is one of those. And maybe it's just for fans. Maybe the guys will go to the plate with every bit of confidence, and then they see 103 with a splinker, and maybe they lose some of that confidence. It's crazy. Some of the pitches that he throws don't make sense.
It's like watching wiffle ball.
Basically, yes. He's amazing. And after the first start, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if this is everything that people said it was going to be. He allowed 2 base runners per inning.
BK was like, this is a wash-up bust.
The last 5 starts have been amazing. And he's every bit as good as advertised. Alex, tickets are pretty cheap going to tonight's game. So if anybody wants to go, more than enough tickets are available for you. What are you expecting from this one from the Cardinals?
Not a lot. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of competitive at-bats against Skenes, which, I mean, is somewhat understandable when you have that level of talent going up against you. But, I mean, that's what Pittsburgh has to offer. They've got some of the best pitching right now in Major League Baseball, especially in the National League Central. So I'm excited to see it because once you get to watch it go up against your team, it feels a lot more like, hey, you're seeing what this guy has to offer. I haven't caught a whole lot of Paul Skenes starts over the season.
Get excited.
I know. Get excited. But on the Cardinals' point of view, this is going to be very disappointing for people, I think, after you see that stat line. Again, I'll say it. What he did against the Cubs a few starts ago, plan on that. 11 strikeouts, no hits.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I love good pitching, so I'm excited to see him for the first time going up against the Cardinals. And I think this is a good kind of litmus test series for the Cardinals to see where you kind of stack up with an up-and-coming Pirates team because I don't like their offense. I don't think they've developed position players, but, man, have they developed some good pitching. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where the Cardinals' offense, especially their younger guys, stack up going against a really good youngster in Skenes and then against Keller in Game 3 of the series.
I think you win tonight. I think they find a way to win this one. I think Skenes goes 5. I think he goes 5. He shuts down your offense. I do not think you'll do much against him, but I think you'll be able to get into that middle of their bullpen. Cardinals end up winning tonight by a final score of 4-2. That's my official prediction for tonight's game.
You don't believe that.
I do. If you missed anything from today's show,
Michaelis, right?
Yeah, you do know who's the
Skenes almost has the same amount of strikeouts as him.
Yeah, I know that their offense
started like a month later.
They'll be fine. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, you got a winning tonight?
Yeah, 4-0 loss.
There you go. T-Bone?
I think 4-1 Pirates.
All right, 4-2. Cardinals win tonight is my official prediction. We will talk about a Cardinals victory tomorrow at 11 a.m. We will see you guys then. It is we went Blues Day tomorrow, by the way. Jordan Bennington joining the show tomorrow at noon. So get excited for that. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.